необачний. Гей, вернися, сайдачний, візьми свою жінку, віддай тютюн люльку необачний. Гей, долиною, гей, широкою необачний. Мені жінкою не носиться, мені жінкою не носиться, а тютюнка люлька козаку в дорозі знадобиться. Ой, у лузі червона калина похилилася, чогось наша славна Україна зажурилася. А ми тую червону калину підіймемо, а ми нашу славну Україну гей-гей розвеселимо. А ми тую червону калину підіймемо, а ми нашу славну Україну гей-гей розвеселимо. Не хилися, червона калино, маєш білий цвіт. Не журися, славна Україно, маєш вільний рід. А ми тую червону калину підіймемо, а ми нашу славну Україну гей-гей розвеселимо. А ми тую червону калину підіймемо, а ми нашу славну Україну гей-гей розвеселимо.
Гей, у полі ярої пшениці золотистий лав, розпочали стрільці українські з ворогами там. А ми тую ярою пшеницю і зберемо, а ми нашу славну Україну гей-гей розвеселимо. А ми тую ярою пшеницю і зберемо, а ми нашу славну Україну гей-гей розвеселимо. Як повіє низенький вітер широких степів,
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у щах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великой страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар. Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
Hello, everybody.
And tonight we're here to report on the final day of Week 12 And as the sun rises today in Ukraine, at this very hour, we are now entering week 13 of the war, and we're entering the first day of the 4th month of the war. To imagine that Ukraine once again has made it this far is truly unbelievable. Even if they were, in the end, although I don't believe this will ever be the case, having to cede territory to the Russians, the fact that they put up a fight this well for this long and have caused this much damage to the Russian military says a lot about Ukraine as a nation, who they are, and how far they've come since their inception just around 30 years ago as a modern nation. So with that in mind, welcome again everyone, and let's go over tonight's schedule for the news. We're actually going to be starting off in Kyiv today. We have one small bit of news to cover here. Of course, I gave you a little sneak peek of it there, but we will get back to that in a second. We'll then be traveling into Russia. And we have two bits of news today. We have some news from St. Petersburg, and we also have some news that it put in Voronezh, although we're not really sure where it is. I just want to make sure that this marker wasn't so far east in the country that I would forget about it, because sometimes that does happen. So that marker is not accurate to its location. We'll then be going over the news we've gotten near Belgorod, and we'll also be covering our location unknowns. We have about 12 of them, which isn't a lot, and I'm very happy to say that, because we're not lacking any news today. It's just that we've been able to locate and track down a lot more of where stuff has been happening today than other days. So I'm very happy about that. So once we cover the location unknown news, we'll then be moving to give a summary of the Kharkiv area of last we heard. And before we do, we'll be answering 3 questions from the chat. Then we'll cover the Kharkiv area and also the northern Donbas, which is chock full of information today. There has been a load of activity around the Severodonetsk bulge, I guess you could call it at this point, and it is showing a very interesting picture unfolding there. And this will also lead me into a brand new analysis, and you heard that right. We have not analyzed the front lines for some time at this point, but we're now going to go through and analyze them again, because I believe the situation has changed enough that the yellow lines that I outlined here weeks ago are no longer the case, and the Russians are going to try out new battle plans, and they've changed them up, and in their minds they'll hopefully be met with more success. Once we cover the northern Donetsk area and, well, the northern Donbas and the Kharkiv area, we'll then pause to take another 3 questions from the chat. Then we'll move down into the Donetsk area, cover the amount of news that we have there, and then we'll cover the rest of the news in the southern front. And also, the small bit of news, and I have to remember this one because this one's going to be very hard for me to remember, the little bit of news we've gotten in Romania today. And also, it's another interesting tidbit that I feel is important to show. And then once we cover that last bit of news, we will then return back to Kyiv, going in a full circle, and cover the speech made by President Zelensky today, as we do every single day on this stream. And so, without further ado, let's get started with the news. Starting off in Kyiv, we can see that some artists have been doing a great service to the entire world. Everyone remembers that at the beginning of this war, there was a certain character that became very famous, based off of the Javelin ATGM. The name was Saint Javelin, and here we can see loads of pictures on Google Images of Saint Javelin, just load after load after load. There's one, and they all look the same. They're literally the exact same. But it became incredibly popular and famous over that short period of time, and it's still stuck around. While we don't see it as much now as we used to, we do see that some artists finally finished a mural on the side of a building in Kyiv. That is impressive. It looks just like the images online. They did an incredible job, and you can already see that it's become a tourist attraction in a way as people take pictures in front of it. I've got to say, the artist who did this, apparently it was a group called Kailash V. They've done an incredible job. You wouldn't even be able to tell that from a computerized image on the internet that was made by someone who wasn't having to paint a literal wall with this image. So I've got to say, I'm super impressed with this, and I thought this was really cool. So I wanted to share this with everyone, because it is neat to know that, I guess, memes in a way, because this is more of a meme, are actually very prevalent in Ukraine, and they're actually getting widespread attention to the point they're actually becoming murals. So now we're going to move into Russia, and oh boy, do we have news in Russia today. Today, the Russian Ministry of Defense has announced that the Admiral Kuznetsov, which is the only operational aircraft carrier in the Russian Navy, has now been holed up at port, and they're now going to start the renovation process on that aircraft carrier. The aircraft carrier is going to be out of service, I believe, until let me make sure by the Post here. According to the Post, if it loads, come on. Until 2023, so it's going to be out of service for the entirety of this year. But they had some great pictures of it. Let's see if we can pull them up online, because Kuznetsov carrier undergoing maintenance. Let's see if we can get any pictures from this, because I would love to show this to y'all. The thing looked awful. Of course, most aircraft carriers around the world look terrible whenever they're brought into dry dock, but this thing looked particularly awful. Let me see if I can find a picture. Let's see. So there's showing a picture, but it's not the pictures I saw on the state media. Here's one. You can actually see that they've stripped up a decent amount of the upper deck, and it seems like they're going to try and refinish it. But the main point is that this aircraft carrier is going to be completely out of service. It's not like it could be used anyways, because the Bosphorus Strait has been cut off to the Russians. The Russians do not have access to it, so it wouldn't have been able to sell into the Black Sea anyways. But still, the fact is that this thing is a terrible aircraft carrier, even at that. It has had a history of fires, mechanical failures, and disasters on board. It is probably one of the most dangerous and unsafe aircraft carriers around the world, and we can see that the Russians are, of course, taking great care of it. There is at least a rumor, I'm not really sure if this was true or not, that it used to actually be considered a punishment to be, I guess you could say, not really deployed, stationed on the Admiral Kuznetsov. Apparently it was a terrible ship to be on, and I wouldn't doubt it based off of its operational history. Unfortunately, I don't have the pictures that were shown on Reddit to show y'all, because they were pretty interesting. And so we're now going to move further down, and we're going to move to the city of Voronezh. Now, once again, the marker isn't accurate. I don't really know where this was in particular, but we do have a follow-up video that was shown in Melitopol today. So I'll be showing both of them, but this one does not have a location tacked on to it. So we're going to wait for this thing to load. Hopefully this one hasn't been deleted either. There we go. So y'all remember yesterday how I said T-62s were being loaded on rail cars and being sent to Ukraine. While I said that yesterday, I was thinking, now, Enforcer, come on. Like, that wouldn't make any sense at all, because, you know, they could just be loading them onto trains and moving them from depot to depot within the country. How would this make any sense? Well, here's video footage today showing T-62s being dragged into Ukraine on a rail car. This is actually near Ukraine, and a railroad, proper name for this, heading into Ukraine. So here's the video. You just can't make this stuff up. It's insane to me. I mean, like, I bet I sound really hyped about this, but I'm really hyped because this is the kind of stuff that Iraq was using in the Gulf War. Oh my gosh, they're sending themselves to their deaths. Just for y'all to remember, the Battle of 73 Easting. And let's go to Wikipedia, because we're not really looking for anything in particular here. We're looking for some pictures. Here is an Iraqi T-62 that was knocked out by an M1 Abrams. And to give y'all a perspective of how dated the T-62 was in the Gulf War, which occurred in 1991, the Americans lost absolutely no tanks during the Battle of 73 Easting, but according to Wikipedia, let me make sure I get these numbers correct, the Iraqis lost 160 tanks and 180 armored personnel carriers in one area, while the Americans only managed to lose one M2 Bradley. One. So that gives you a perspective of how old and dated the Iraqi tanks were. Also, the Iraqis were using a dated doctrine, much like the Soviet doctrine, and the Americans, of course, were using Western doctrine, along with modernized equipment that was up to date for the time. And we could already see that the results right there were disastrous for the Iraqis. The Americans took practically no losses, and the Iraqis took nearly 1,000 killed and 160 tanks destroyed. So this gives you a great idea, considering that this happened in 1991, and actually during the 26th and 27th of February, which is just about 2 days after the invasion started in this very year, which is kind of weird, but that gives you an idea of how poorly these tanks are going to perform inside of Ukraine. They may as well be pointless, may as well be death traps as far as I'm concerned, because if you're pulling tech that's that dated onto the front lines, it's not a good sign. The same can be said, you know, in kind of being a little bit fair, the same could be said about Romania sending their MiG-21s. I haven't heard a lot about them. I'm not even sure if the Ukrainians accepted the MiG-21s, but it was kind of the same thing as Romania offering MiG-21s to Ukraine. like MiG-21s are so dated. They're about the same age as the T-62 that even in their most modernized version, it's kind of not really an efficient system. While something's better than nothing, at the same point, some stuff gets so old that it's like, is it really worth it? So then again, you can see, once again, the Russians are having to pull armor out and actually field it because they've run out of modern stuff. And that goes and lays waste entirely to this whole entire premise that everyone's been, well, not everyone, some people have been putting out that are still kind of like in that Russia strong camp where they go, oh, the Russians haven't been using their most modern stuff. Wait until they pull out the real modern stuff and use that. How in the world can, I don't know how people can keep saying that unless they're just blind, ignorant, or stupid. Because now we can see that the Russians are literally pulling out 60-year-old tanks to fight in this war because they've run out of modern stuff. So that's interesting to me. And we're now going to move on to the last bit of news we've got in Russia before we move on to our location unknowns, where we can see an Iskander ballistic missile in use again by the Russians. We can see it prepare to fire and be launched by its short-range ballistic missile launcher. So here's that video. I do have to keep it muted. But here we can see, once again, we've seen videos like this before. We can see this missile being prepared to fire and being lifted out of its silo on the back of the truck. And now you can see the Iskander being launched. Every time I see one of these being launched, I always think about all the civilians that could probably be downrange and in the line of danger from this poorly aimed and poorly thought out missile attack. That's really what the Russians do nonstop. We've never seen a missile attack actually hit anything of strategic importance beyond the first day of the war. It's always been a civilian center. So generally, a rule of thumb is that every time you see an Iskander being launched, you can pretty much assure yourself that civilians did die once it went downrange and landed on its target. It's always unfortunate to think about, but hopefully the Ukrainians will have some pretty decent short-range ballistic missile protection systems like the Patriot system and the Iron Dome that can hopefully counter these missiles very soon. We're now finally done with the Russian news, and we're going to head into Ukraine to cover the maroon dots, and something that's very interesting to me, and I don't think I've ever told any of y'all why the color coding is the way it is. And that this color coding was laid out and designed within the first week of this war by me. And what's interesting is that day 1 and day 2 actually were the same color within the first week. They were actually both green because there was so little information, and also I didn't have it segregated at that time in between the days that I just put them all in the same color. So green was when the war was going okay for the Ukrainians. It didn't look like things were going too bad. Yellow was when they started getting close to Kyiv, and red was when they were right on the outskirts of Kyiv and they were starting to get on the highway, the Zhytomyr highway that was surrounding the city. And so the color coding is actually representative of how the first week went, which I've never explained to anyone on stream, and I'm explaining it now because it's something that I always look at, because the color coding beyond this doesn't make any sense. But the first 4 days, well, really, forgetting the olive, the green, the yellow, and the red was reflective of how badly the first 4 days looked like they were going for Ukraine, and then afterwards blue became like a relaxing color because it's like things aren't that bad, Ukraine is holding. Dark gray was just the color I picked, and then maroon was kind of getting close to red again, but it wasn't as bad on day 7 as it was on day 4, so I wanted a color that was different from red, but at the same time conveyed a little bit of a sense of urgency. So that's actually why the color coding is the way it is on the map. And by the way, if y'all would like to take a look at this map in better detail, there is always a link to this updated map in the description below. And if you go onto this map today, you'll actually have all of the markers for this entire week from day 85 to day 91, which is the entirety of week 12, just letting y'all know. And so with that, now that I've explained the color coding, and I hope that kind of gives a little bit of extra significance to how different this war has gone from what everyone thought in the first week, because my color coding was based off of how I thought the war was going to go in the first week. So with that, we're now going to go into the location unknown news. Here we can see a toss strike captured on film. Of course, we don't really see a lot of these. We usually see the tosses being fired, but we never actually see the impact of them downrange. But here in this foggy morning, it seems, somewhere on the front line, we can see all of these tossed thermobaric missiles striking one spot, and because of the fog, the shock waves are much more pronounced. So here's the video. So with that, that's the end of the video, and it's very crazy to me to think that Ukrainian soldiers live through this stuff and have to keep on going through it day after day, and we see them still having high morale. I really can't believe it, honestly, when you really think about the situation and what they have to go through. And Ukrainian soldiers are still dancing and smiling and laughing, and it tells you how much they actually care about their country and how willing they're wanting to keep this fight ongoing, if that was a great way to put it. Sorry if I butchered that one, but still, it's so interesting to me to think that Ukrainians bear through this stuff and continue on going. It's really shocking to me. And with that, we're now going to move on to the next video, where we can see that even though thermobaric strikes, much like that one, are occurring here and there across the front lines and artillery bombardments daily, we can still see that the morale is strong amongst the soldiers, and specifically here in this video, where we can see some soldiers dancing or near a car. Hopefully this one hasn't been deleted. There we go. We can see these guys dancing near a car to some music. So, pretty neat little video, and here it is. And that's the end of the video, but you can see they're having a good time, and that's still incredibly amazing to me. And I have to say, they actually need a round of applause, actually, for keeping up their spirits like that, because they go through terrible things. And while they are winning, and while the situation is a little bit questionable in some areas right now, honestly, they've been winning the entire time, and they've been keeping up their morale so well. And even when things are starting to get a little bit more difficult again, much like wars do, there's a little bit of an ebb and flow to them, they still are keeping up their morale and their spirits are high, and that's a great thing to see. So we're now going to move on to the next video, and I think y'all are actually going to know this cadence. I didn't think they would sing something like this. I thought that the Russians/Ukrainians would have entirely different, I guess you could say, cadences of their own, but while these Ukrainians are digging foxholes, you can hear them chanting a little cadence. So I'm going to let y'all hear it, and then I'm going to tell y'all what I think it sounds like. So here's the video.
Холод, спека, мряка! Оборона чи атака! А мені то все байдуже! Бо біля мене справжній друже! Біля мене, друже! Тож мені байдуже! А як доля припече! Поруч другове плече! Красавці, продовжуємо!
So here's the lyric that I think they're copying. I don't know what I've been told. If y'all remember that one, it's old as Methuselah, but you can hear a little bit of it right here in particular.
Оборона чи атака!
That literally sounds like it. I think they've copied it and put their own lyrics to it, but that was incredibly funny for me to hear, and it's also really cool to see them all, hear them all, you know, like singing along, kind of keeping up with it and stuff. So really neat to me. I didn't think they'd actually do something like that, so I hope that's about as exciting and cool to y'all as it was to me, because I was like, wow, that's so cool. Like, they literally are copying it. And so we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see Attack of Ukraine 13, the Don strikes back. Y'all thought that Don disappeared. Y'all thought that joke was really annoying and it never come back, but Don never leaves. Don is back, and we can see the guy who looks like he smells like ham and cheese sitting here and saying Don every single 3 words, literally. So here's the video, and there's also a speech-to-text translation at the bottom, so that way y'all know what he's saying during all the middle of his Dons. You know what I mean? So, come on, why in the world is Reddit doing that every single time now? It's like saying it can't load it. It hasn't done that any other night. So here's the guy who honestly looks like, honestly, if I had to say he looked like someone, hopefully I'm not like getting anyone freaked out here or anything, but he kind of looks like one of those football chavs from England, you know, except he's grown a beard, and he's the leader of Chechnya, at least the Kyiv Chechnya. And so here's him talking, and I swear he says Don every 3 words, so let's check it out.
Ну, Украина это закрытый вопрос, Дон. Мне интересно Польша, Дон. Польша, Дон, чего добивается, Дон? после Украины, Дон, если будет команда, Дон, мы 6 секунд, Дон, покажем вам, на что вы способны, Дон. Лучше заберите, Дон, свое оружие, своих наемников, Дон, и попросите, Дон, официально извинения за нашего посла, Дон. Мы это просто не оставим, Дон. Имейте в виду, Дон.
So bear that in mind, Dawn. We're going to invade your country, Dawn, and take all your weapons, Dawn. You might as well make your mercenaries surrender. I don't know what's up with this guy, but I feel like this guy is really stupid. I don't know. I mean, I feel like it had maybe like a very adept nature to assess people's personalities, but based off the way this guy is talking, his body language, and how he uses Don so much, I honestly think this guy is about the stupidest one on earth. Like as a leader, they need to tell this guy to go take a nap or something, or go become a Gopnik again or something. I don't know, because this guy is certainly not cut out to be any kind of leader, even if it's of a bunch of stupid Kadyrovites, you know, that are out there doing goofy stuff. And we got another video to show the Kadyrovites doing stupid stuff. And I also want to make this clear again. It isn't Chechens in general. Of course, there's a lot of great Chechens, and a lot of them are fighting on the side of Ukrainians. So I want to make sure that when we talk about this stupid guy, just remember he doesn't reflect the Chechen people as a whole. He's a pretty stupid dude. He's just a Kadyrovite, which puts him on a different plane than everyone else. So we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown news. Hope you all got a good laugh out of that, Dawn. And so with that, Dawn, we're going to move on to the next one, Dawn, where we can see another Switchblade in use. And we can actually see how this one was launched. Sadly, I will, of course, have to keep this one muted. It does have copyrighted music in it. But it's a very interesting little sequence. We actually get to see how these things are used. And so we can see that there's a little foot plate at the bottom, and apparently you put your foot on the bottom of this thing. It has a bipod on it, so that way it can kind of be placed like a small mortar, which is really cool to me. And we can now see him pushing down on a trigger. Give it just a second. There we go. And then the little Switchblade drone pops up out of its barrel and then goes flying off into the distance. And so we can now see that they're reveling in the success of the launch. And we can now see a little kind of like iPad area that they've set up in the area of this ruined building, where it looks like they may be controlling the switchblades from. It actually looks like that's the switchblade camera right there. So this is kind of a look into how a switchblade drone kind of works on the operator side of things. Now we can see another picture of the little Switchblade drone launcher, and you can actually see the little Switchblade sticking out right there. We can also see wow, that thing's got a drum mag! That's really neat. We haven't seen that before. And also, that looks like an AK-12. And then we have, I don't know what that is, a law? You know, I'm not really sure about that one. But still, oh, we got a Red Bull! Hey, y'all, look! They're drinking energy drinks over there, Red Bulls. That's really cool. But anyways, getting back to the whole war and everything, we can actually get a pretty good look at how these switchblades work. So it's pretty neat to see. And it is, of course, wonderful to know that the Ukrainians have a large amount of these things. We're starting to see a lot of videos of them being used. And so I'm assuming that they finally actually made it over there. So we're going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see some Ukrainian Su-25s in flight. Now, I'm going to be honest before we start this video, I'm very skeptical that this has actually been taken during the war, because if you notice on the rear Su-25 that you can see here in this video, it doesn't have any armament on the pylons. And the pylons are the little, I guess you could call them pieces that are sticking out under the wing. They kind of look like little teeth, and you can kind of see them here in the next part of the video, right there. And you can see that there's no weapons on the pylon, so I'm assuming that this was probably made before the war, but still, it's a great video of Ukrainian Su-25s in flight. Here it looks like they may be flying over the Dnieper River. And that is the end of the video, but a great one nonetheless, and it's always cool to see some aircraft in flight, specifically Ukrainian aircraft. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we see the Ukrainians have managed to capture another Russian tank. The Ukrainians never stop capturing Russian vehicles. It's something that they've nearly become addicted to, I guess you could say. There's never a day that goes by without the Ukrainians managing to capture something. So here we can see the Ukrainians managing to capture this T-72B3 that also looks like it has spare fuel tanks on the back. Very neat addition that we haven't seen before. And we can see them giving a little bit of a tour on this thing. We can see it was detracked. You can actually see the track sticking out of the back there, which demobilized the tank, and most likely was what led to the crew abandoning it. And we can also see a very distinct and interesting marking that I don't think we've seen much before. This is an O, like we've normally seen, but it has a slash through it, I guess you could say. And we haven't seen anything like that before, so I don't know if this is some kind of new unit identifier or what, but that is an interesting observation. Hopefully we can get some more information on that, and I can tell y'all what specifically that is and what it's supposed to mean. So now I'm going to let the video continue on. And that is the end of the video. Also, another interesting thing to point out about this T-72B3 is that it hasn't gotten the entire modernized, I guess you could call it, protection package. On a totally up-to-date T-72B3, there are these kind of saddlebag things on the side of the tank, and they're filled with ERA tiles. I'll try and show y'all a picture of one so that way y'all can get an idea of what I'm talking about. I just found it right here. These are kind of the saddlebag things I'm talking about, and these things are filled with ERA tiles, and they're stacked on top of each other, kind of like a Spanish terracotta roof, if you know what I'm talking about. And so, in theory, that's supposed to help the side of the tank be better armored and protected against most chemical munition rounds. Kinetics can go right through, and that's a whole other story about what a chemical and kinetic round is. But the general gist is that this is supposed to provide more protection. But we can see here on this T-72B3, it's entirely devoid of that, which may be telling us that the Russians are lacking as a whole protective packages that are the most up-to-date and most modernized. So that's something very interesting to point out and also observe whenever you see captured T-72B3s or any of the modernized and captured T-80Us, I believe, get that package. Let me make sure. No, T-80Us do not get that package, at least from picture evidence. I believe that BVMs do, though. Let me see. Oh, boy. I don't... Yeah, there it is, right there. You can see them on the side of a BVM as well. So the most modernized Russian tanks that will be fielded on the battlefield will almost always have, if they're completely modernized and upgraded, these kind of protective saddlebags on the side. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see some Ukrainian peons in action. And you heard that right, it's not a pion, it's a peon. I asked Starsky about that on Sunday, and I got confirmation that that's actually the name. So I kind of busted out laughing about that because, of course, peon is an insult here in English, but apparently in Ukrainian, it means something else. So with that, well, here's the video of them in operation. And also I have to mute it. And it's in slow motion as well, which is very nice cinematically. I mean, like, what a video. It's really impressive to see these SPGs firing. Of course, they're not as impressive in terms of range as an M777 or a Caesar SPG. But at the same time, they're incredibly interesting to watch, and they're a very unique system on top of that, just because of the sheer size of the gun that's equipped onto the back of them. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see Ukrainian drone in use. This is also an incredibly interesting little bit of film, and we can see that it is apparently helping out in its own way. Highly visible. It's very interesting to me that this is orange. Usually you would think that there'd be some kind of light gray, but we can see here that this one is very visible. Now we'll have to mute it. It does have music. We can now see the drone heading upwards in altitude and getting ready to set out on its journey. We can now see it guiding in the artillery, and it appears to have hit a vehicle dead on right there. We can now see another vehicle slowly moving through a field in that clip right here, and it was definitely ablaze. I don't think the crew's having a fun day in that one. And it looks like this BMP may have had a little bit of Taco Bell. Notice how the explosion erupts out of the back end of the BMP instead of the top. Very indicative of eating a 5-layer burrito. We can now see the drone coming back down to its operators and landing after a successful mission of guiding in the artillery. can't ever get enough of the drone operators. The drone operators, along with the artillery, have been the shining aspect of Ukraine's military and probably one of its best saving graces, to say the least. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a BM-27, which y'all may know as the Uragan, firing off into the distance. Of course, this is a Ukrainian one, and so we know that the firepower it's levying is hopefully going to great efforts. So here's the video, and of course, it's going to be kind of loud, but here it is. Now, how much that Uragan is angled, that is an incredibly high arc. That is probably probably one of the closest range barrages, I guess you could say, that an Uragan could fire, considering they're going nearly vertical. So whatever it's firing at must be incredibly close. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a Russian prisoner of war recounting his experiences in the army before he was captured. Now, this is probably one of the most interesting recounts of a story that I've seen from a Russian prisoner, and so I highly suggest y'all watch this one in great detail, because he gives a lot of pretty interesting information. So I'm going to not talk, I'm going to let him do the talking, and also there's a speech. Actually, there's a guy translating it live, so I'm going to start this at the beginning and let it play.
Our command screwed us. After our command arrived and we said we wanted to leave, there was a fight, we were taken prisoner, we surrendered.
They brought us to Belgorod, cheated us right away and sent us to the territory of Ukraine, to where the fighting was going on. After we stayed there for a couple of days, we understood, well, this is a wrong war. We wanted to leave the unit, well, on our own wheels, to cancel the contract, to put it simple. The commander replied,
He replied that we will only leave this place either in a coffin or wounded. If we try to run away, well, everything around is mined. And he says we'll just be shot at our own checkpoints. And then he left.
when we realized that there's no one to fight here, that there are only civilians here and that there are no Nazis, we realized that it's complete bullshit. When artillery is fucking bombarding civilians and houses. When we approached our commander and expressed our desire to leave this place, we were told that we are leaving this place only as cargo 200 or 300.
Here's the real situation in Ukraine. The people have risen and united against the Russians, who have come and are going wild here full on. Looting, they're robbing, raping. Security Service of Ukraine.
And so, with that being the end of the video, some very interesting information was divulged by those Russian prisoners in particular. And it's not something that we haven't heard before. We've actually heard them threatening the same thing to the DPR and LPR troops that are stuck in the Kharkiv salient north of the city. They've been told that if they try and retreat into Russia, they too will be shot. So it seems like it's a normal Russian go-to strategy to just tell everyone you're going to be shot if you don't do what you're supposed to be doing. It kind of honestly reminds me a lot of Enemy at the Gates, which is a very fictionalized movie based off of how Stalingrad really went, where when the Russian soldiers tried to retreat, they were gunned down by the NKVD. And it seems like the Russians took that movie to heart and apparently ripped a few pages of the script out of it to start learning how to actually treat their own soldiers. And so I think the war will be going incredibly well for them, considering that it seems that a lot of Russians seem to be disheartened by the news that they'll most likely be shot if they try and retreat. We're now going to move on to our last bit of location unknown news. And this is, of course, something cute, and I want to end off our location unknown news was something that was pretty lighthearted, because a lot of people always focus on the doom and gloom all over, about the war and stuff. And while it is a war, there's always a little bit of a silver lining to everything where you can have a little smile or a little laugh. And so I always want to make sure to include that, at least here in the location unknowns. Here we can see some boys defending a playground and playing soldier pretty much like we've seen before. And so I'm going to let y'all see this video and let y'all think about how cute these little kids are doing what they're doing, and also think about the danger that they're being put under, considering that this war is still going. You know, of course, it's a double-edged sword, but here's the video.
Звичайно. Тримай, тобі який, український чи закордонний?
Давайте український.
Давайте, от так. Але обережно там карточки.
Добре.
Все добре?
Так.
Можу пройти?
Так, можете приходити.
Дуже дякую.
Now, isn't that just funny? Now, I bet y'all remember, a lot of y'all have been around watching every stream. Y'all also remember the little kids who had the toy guns and were saluting the army trucks that were driving by. And these little kids are also pretty silly too, in a way, because they're checking passports and stuff like it's a border crossing checkpoint. But still, it's wonderful to know that the kids are alive and well, and that they're saying they're trying to play soldier, and they're probably doing it because their dads are actually fighting in this war, when you really think about it. And that kind of adds another layer to it, where you're kind of a little saddened by it, thinking, oh man, you know, those poor kids, they could have a dead dad at this point, and they don't know, or they could know, and they're still going on and, you know, playing soldier and stuff. And when you think about it like that, it's kind of sad. So before I sit here and get myself tearing up, that is the end of the location unknown news. And so we're now going to start moving on to the Kharkiv area and then downwards into the northern Donbas, where most of our news is today. But before we do, we're going to answer 3 questions from the chat, and then we'll return back to the news. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so good afternoon, everybody. It is Enforcer Matt. Just real quick, I want to mention for anybody that might be asking, last night we did have a power outage that caused our stream to get basically cut in half, and then we had to restart. And then there was an issue with the actual second part of the stream, and it didn't get uploaded as a video for some reason. We don't know why, but it was a glitch, and it's not there, unfortunately. So that's what happened for everybody asking. And with that being said, we are moving on to our first question. So the first one we have is from Junebug72, a longtime channel viewer who puts in a $24 donation and says, hello, wheelchair walking my dogs while the 3 teens eat their pizza. And here's a pizza for you and Matt.
Well, thank you so much for the support, Junebug. Of course, the support always helps us out a lot, and that is really it. You're multitasking a lot right now. So, I mean, like, golly. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that you don't get too overloaded there with everything that you've got going on. And so I thank you very much, and we will make sure to get a pizza with your support. So thank you once again. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Kaltenberg, who is a longtime channel supporter as well, who says, thanks to Team Enforcer.
Well, I thank you so much, because one thing is that everyone gives us a lot of support, but this channel wouldn't be anywhere without our viewers. And so I thank you all so much once again for watching this channel and also supporting us and allowing us to keep on doing the work we do. And so thank you all once again. It does mean a lot to us. And with that being said, we're on to the last question of the segment, and then we'll be returning back to the news.
And real quick, before I get to the last question of the segment, I want to recognize a $20 donation from another longtime channel viewer, Krister Peterson. Thank you very much, Krister, for your continued support. As always, we appreciate you watching, and we appreciate you helping support the channel. So moving on to our last question of the segment, we have a $16 donation from Sean Brereton, I believe is how you say it. If not, please correct me, Sean. They say, there is increasing news about NATO British ships already seen in the Black Sea as recently as 1 hour ago, apparently to guide grain ships. Are you seeing this too?
I'm not seeing that at the moment. I unfortunately don't really look at a lot of news that's international, and that kind of is getting into the international news segment. So sadly, I couldn't really talk about that all too much because I don't have any news on it, sadly. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to declare ignorance. But I do thank you very much for the support. And I'm sorry I couldn't answer that question, but I do thank you very much for helping us keep on doing the work we keep on trying to do. And so with that, we've now reached the end of this question segment. If you did send in a super chat, do not fret. We will get to them all by the end of the night. And so with that, we're now going to return back to the Kharkiv news. And also, just for everyone else, just for people who may be new, we do not go without answering live chat questions every single night. You don't have to send in a super chat to have a question answered, but if you would like to support the channel and keep it going, You can send in a super chat, and if you do and you have a question attached, we will answer it because we want to make sure that everyone who keeps this channel running does get something out of it. And so with that, we're now going to be going to the Kharkiv area. Once again, this has been the recurring message since day 88, is that there's been absolutely no news from the Kharkiv salient. We have no idea what's going on up here anymore. I believe that all operations on both sides have completely stopped, and the salient will be here for some while. We don't really have any idea why the offensive stopped, and we don't have any idea why the Russians aren't pushing back out, but right now we have gotten absolutely no information, and so I'm not really sure how long that's going to be, but that's all we have on that area for now. We're now going to start moving more south along the front, of course past the Donetsk reservoir because nothing ever happens there, and we're now going to be moving down into the area around Izium. We're going to skip this area here because nothing really ever happens there. And we're now in the area of Izium, and near this village of Lazov today, we've seen the 57th Brigade destroy some LPR tanks, specifically T-64 BVs. So hopefully this video loads. Sorry about the load times tonight, don't really know why that's the case. But here's the video of the two T-64s burning on the road. As you can see, looks like a nice little Rice Krispie down there. Of course, it's getting a little toasty at this point. We can, of course, see the Z clearly painted onto the front of the T-64, and we can also see some kind of camo netting around the barrel, which is an interesting addition that we haven't seen before. We can also see the track clearly over on the left side of the tank, which is most likely what led to the tank being abandoned. As we can see, all three hatches are open, and the crew has clearly bailed. We can now see the drone panning further on down the road, and it looks like they're trying to get to the second tank, which seems to be a little bit more fiery. It's having a small little bit of a burning session. I guess you could say that if the Ukrainians were to enter a roast competition, I'm sure they would clearly win, because at this point they've roasted thousands of Russians, and I don't think they have any signs of stopping soon, as per this example here. Knowing the Russians, they'll actually try and recover that tank and in 50 years' time push it back into service in the exact same condition it's in now, because that's exactly what they're doing with the T-62s. We can now see the drone panning around and taking a good look at everything. And then the video ends right there, and we can see that this guy actually has some very low battery on his phone. He needs to get that thing recharged. And also, let's take a look at this little phone thing here, because we can get a little bit of information about it. Let's see, this says "ni gras." This says "tri bas poshik." I'm not really sure what this stuff says, but hopefully someone can translate that in the comment section and give us all a better idea of what this actually says on this iPhone interface. So I'm going to leave this here for a few seconds just so that way someone can translate it. And now we're going to move on to the next bit of news. Once again, that's the only bit of news that we've gotten near the Izium area. We haven't gotten anything else. And so right now, the situation seems largely static here as well. And now we're going to move down to the area of the front line where there will be some massive changes to our yellow area. So I'm actually going to delete those because we're going to be drawing up. Excuse me, sorry, I didn't drink a coffee tonight, just for y'all to know. We're now going to be covering the Severodonetsk area and also the Lyman area. We can see that here in Lyman today, there's a large amount of fighting that is still going on, as we can see Ukrainian Su-25s attacking Russian positions in the area of Lyman. Here's that video, if it does load. Hopefully it does. So here's the video. We can see the Su-25 popping flares. We can also hear the sound of the missiles being fired. And is now hitting the floor and trying to get out of there as fast as possible. We can also see a second Su-25 closer to the ground. And that is the end of the video. And this is actually the reason why we have the title we have today, is because we're actually going to be discussing the strategic situation surrounding Lyman here in a second. So we have one last video from the Lyman area where we can see some fast-moving Ukrainian troops. We can hear a very well put-together NCO, some kind of sergeant, barking out orders to the troops and coordinating nearly 1 million things all at the same time, including this very fast pickup of other Ukrainian soldiers while they're in the middle of an artillery barrage. Call this man Mr. Multitasker, because this guy has got everything on his plate and he's got nothing but the ability and the will to do it. And so here's the video.
Давай, 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 давай! Давай! Давай, 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 давай! Давай!
We can now see the soldiers have hopped on board and they're off. We can, just to pause it here, we can see that they actually had to stop because apparently there was a little bit of a lagger, a guy lagging behind, and so they've now stopped to wait to pick him up. Now, that's something you wouldn't see the Russians do. The Russians would have taken off and left this guy behind, and that's just not a propaganda standpoint. We've actually seen multiple videos that show evidence that the Russians literally just leave lagging people behind. So here's the video, and I'm just going to let the rest of it play. Is that a golden AK? Wait a minute, that's a golden AK. Oh my god, he doesn't even have a buttstock to it. This is literally some I don't know why, but that's really cool to me. I love that. I don't know if y'all like that too, but that is literally a golden AK. I never thought we'd see one of those during this entire war, but there it is, a golden AK. I'm freaking out right now, honestly. That like, I don't want to sound cheap or anything, but that's something you would see on Call of Duty, is that this guy would have gotten a kill streak and then gotten a golden AK or something. And that's honestly unbelievable to me that this man has one. So I'm going to let the video continue. We can now hear the artillery coming in right behind him.
Давай, 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 давай!
Oh my god! I thought, when I saw this little cage on the side, I thought I was imagining things. And maybe I am. Let me pull this up and make sure. Striker APC. Let's take a look at this. Let's try and see if we can find one with a protective grating on the side. Because, oh my god, I honestly think that's a striker. And if it is, I didn't... Hey, here's one. Let's take a look. Alright, so we got the wheel layout. The lower hull is shaped a certain way. They have the driver's periscopes over there. I honestly think that's a striker. I didn't even know they were getting that. Slat armor. Thank you very much, buddy, for bringing that up. I was trying to think of the name for that. I just call it like mesh or grate or something like that. I don't ever have an actual name for anything, so I'm sorry if I do butcher some of the terminology sometimes. It's just kind of what I do, but I'm going to take a better look at this for a second, so everyone bear with me. But I honestly think that's 100% a striker. There's that little metal slot in between the second and third wheel that comes down, so let's go back and see if that's here on this vehicle, because this is going to let us know that some Western gear has gotten over there that I didn't even know about. No, it's not. It's some kind of BTR, because it also has these additional little protrusions in between the wheels. So sorry, for a second there, I actually got really hyped up and thought that the West, like the United States, for example, had sent some Striker APCs over, but sadly, they haven't. This is some kind of BTR. I'm not really sure what kind, but we're now going to let the video continue.
Давай, аппарат подбежай! Давай, давай, давай! Давай, десь маскируй сюда, сейчас закриют! Вперед, нахуй ему скажи!
Скажіть йому, хай підлізти стане.
So now you see them hightailing it down the road.
Блядь, підлізь, стань, своїх заберем нахуй. Локи, Євський, давайте двигайте сюди, ми тут щось десь коробочку станемо.
We can now see that they've pulled over, and it appears that they're preparing to dismount. Also, I would like to note, just to make sure, we get a good look at this guy's shoes again. Are those? Nah, those can't. I thought they were Dockers for a second. I was about to say I love the guy's Dockers, like he's going to be out there in style, but he doesn't have Dockers. But those don't look like boots either, so I don't know what kind of shoes he's got. But still, a very impressive display by the Ukrainian soldiers as they quickly picked up all of their troops from one position and moved as fast as possible down the road to their next position and began to dismount here at the end of this video. An incredible display of professionalism, timeliness, and accuracy in their objectives. So great to see, and it's wonderful to know that the Ukrainians are exhibiting the key qualities that are, I guess you could say, most pronounced in Western doctrines, which is mostly around speed and actual professionalism. So great to see. And with that, we're now going to move on to our next bit of location, well, actually not location unknown news. We're actually going to move on to our analysis of what's going on now in the Lyman area. So Lyman has kind of become a battleground. The Russians managed to make a breakthrough from Torskay down to Lyman, which is around a 5-mile breakthrough. So far, for about the past 2 days, they've now been caught up in Lyman itself, and they haven't managed to make any ground beyond that. But, just to keep in mind, just some 10 miles away from Lyman is the outskirts of Sloviansk. So, here's what I'm starting to think now. A push from Izium seems to be impractical and unreasonable now that the Russians have managed to make a breakthrough here at Lyman instead. So I believe what the Russians will most likely be doing is that they're going to push down the T-0514 towards Sloviansk, and then once they reach Sloviansk in that railhead, they're most likely going to start causing large amounts of supply issues across this entire front, and most likely lead to the Ukrainians having to conduct some kind of retreat out of it. That's what I'm starting to think. And so the Battle of Lyman is actually incredibly important when you look at it in that perspective, and ensuring that the Ukrainian alliance can hold, otherwise they could be jeopardized from every direction. Also, another thing that I saw someone say, which is not true at all, is that Lyman is threatening this entire western, I guess you could call, bulge in the Ukrainian lines, and that's not true. And here's the reason why. Unlike Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, which has a major highway running directly to them, this entire area has not had a major highway running through it. So all of the supplies that have been reaching the Ukrainian units holding down this area have been traveling through the small country roads already, and we know for sure that Lyman was probably too close to the front lines even at that time to actually be used as a railhead. The railhead here in the northern area is most likely in Sloviansk or Kramatorsk, and that's not providing any information that'll be detrimental to the Ukrainians. The Russians will probably know that already, and it's probably common knowledge. In fact, the Ukrainians might not even be using trains in general. It may be entirely truck convoys as a whole. But still, the situation on the western, I guess you could call bulge again, isn't really threatened by this push here to Lyman. But the entire situation here in this, I guess you could say, eastern bulge, I don't want to say that. I was about to say Twin Peaks, but that doesn't sound right. Here in this, I guess you could call it double bulge. That sounds worse. We're just going to call it the Eastern Front. Here in this Eastern Front, if Lyman was managed to be able to be pushed through, and the Russians actually managed to break through, the last place the Ukrainians could hold them before they get straight to Sloviansk would actually be the Seversky Donetsk River again. And we're actually going to put down a new line so that way we can highlight where the Russians will most likely be stopped. Here's the Oskil River, which is another important river. But let me put this down right here. We're going to draw this up so that way we can lay out what this whole entire front line could turn into if it went entirely defensive for the Ukrainians. We're really about to get artistic here, so give me just a second, everyone. Trying to make sure that these lines are as accurate as possible without being too meticulous. So then it flows through here. You can actually see an interesting little event where the Seversky Donetsk River has left little lakes as it's kind of changed its course over the years. The Mississippi River also does the same thing. We're going to keep going. I'm getting a little meticulous there. Sorry, y'all. We're going to keep on going across through here, down this way, down Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, and then we're going to cut it off once we pass through the city right there. And so we're going to call this the Donetsk River, and we're going to color this a very light blue color, that color. There we go. And so, well, actually, that's so blue, it actually blends in with the rest of the map. Let's see if we can change that color. There we go. So that is the Seversky Donetsk River. And of course, this is going to be a major obstacle for the Russians to cross, because the Ukrainians can destroy all of the bridges that are across the Seversky Donetsk River. So if the Ukrainians did have to withdraw from this western pocket, and also from this eastern pocket, by and large, the western pocket would largely remain intact, because they'd be able to hold the fronts on the other side of the river, and also manage to destroy the very few bridges that cross the Seversky Donetsk River, which would lead the Russians into having to conduct pontoon bridge crossings, which we already know are incredibly dangerous for the Russians and incredibly risky. So I don't think the Russians would be pursuing that objective, and that may lead this entire front line to a stall if the Ukrainians had to retreat over the Seversky Donetsk River. And so while the Russians may be able to win the battle at Lyman, the question would be, would they be able to manage to capture this bridge over the Seversky Donetsk River intact, and then break through the Ukrainian lines on the other side, and then push into Slovyansk? And the answer to that is that would be an incredibly daunting and difficult task for even the best of militaries to do. So it would be a pretty difficult scenario, to say the least. But here's what I'm seeing may be the oncoming encirclements, and I don't even think the Russians are going to go all out with this. It's just small pushes that will lead to the front line being destabilized enough that the Ukrainians would most likely retreat. So this area here, heading to Bakhmut, don't actually have to capture the town. This would probably be a Russian offensive area, so we'll put that down in yellow like we usually do. Put this slightly transparent with a little thick border. Heading down to Bakhmut. Once you get to Bakhmut, you cut off the T1302 Highway. And that's a very secure area to hold, because you're cutting it off at the very source instead of further up. The Russians could also go for something much simpler, and they could push from Vrubivka onto the T1302. This will probably be a lot easier for the Russians to do, although I believe it would most likely be temporary, because the Ukrainians could just move reserves. Well, that's going into what the Ukrainians would do. So we're going to put Russian push right there. We'll highlight that one yellow. The FSB is going to kill me for what I do someday, but anyways, finally at Lyman, if the Russians were able to manage to push through Lyman, they would most likely hop straight onto the T0514, try and take the bridge or somewhere around it, so we'll include an area around the river for that to be taken into account, and straight down the T0514 to Slovyansk, and then begin to directly attack it and make sure that the Ukrainians cannot use the railhead there. So we're going to, once again, widen out that area so that way we can account for the large river area that may have to be held for them to make a bridge crossing. And then, let's see, Russian push. And then we'll highlight this one yellow. We'll make it slightly transparent. And then we'll put a little border width on it. There we go. So, with these three pushes alone, the Russians could destabilize this entire front line to the point that the Ukrainians would be in a very disadvantageous position. Of course, I'm not going to go into what the Ukrainians would do. I really want to, because it's interesting to me, and there's a lot of things that they could manage to do. But at the same time, I don't say that stuff here on this channel, because there are YouTube channels out there that have millions of subscribers that watch this stream, and that makes me think, who else is out there watching this stream that I don't know about? So sadly, I won't be able to go into that. But this is giving you all a better lay of the land of what's happening here in the Seversky Donetsk River area, and how the Ukrainian positions could be jeopardized by Russian pushes. So hopefully the Ukrainians are on top of things, and they'll make sure that this doesn't get out of control. And so we're now going to move on to the next bits of news from Severodonetsk and Lysychansk itself. Here we can see an example of what I was saying just a second ago, where I said a river crossing would most likely be highly unlikely and very risky for the Russians, because we can see that the Russians attempted another one today with a BMP-2, and it didn't really live long. So here's the video. Here we can see a BMP-2, and it got hit. Here we can see that another BMP-2 actually, because it had a slightly different explosion, and it got hit.
Counter-terrorists win.
And then we can see someone throw in a meme there at the end. But still, it's great to see that the Ukrainians are still managing to make sure that the Russians cannot push across the Seversky Donetsk River and create a foothold on the other side. Also, just for some people in the chat, because I just saw, let's see, someone said here, Johnny Baby said, seems like this is the only stream saying UA is gaining ground. So many other streams are saying the opposite. What's the truth? I have not said that the Ukrainians are managing to make ground. I've actually said that they've lost some ground, hence the breakthrough from Torskay to Lyman. So just letting you know, I'm not saying that either. Right now they are losing ground across parts of the front, but they can manage to regain the initiative in the situation if they play their cards right. So we're now going to be moving on outside of Severodonetsk, and here in the north near Varvarivka, yeah, I believe that's the pronunciation, where we can see supposed Cossacks firing a 240mm mortar. These are Russian Cossacks, and the history behind them kind of makes them less of Cossacks, and I guess you could say more like pretenders, honestly. But here's the video.
Благодаря этим ребятам мы делаем крутые видео, которые смотрят весь мир. Спасибо им. И привет нацикам будет от них. По нормативу.
Дирекционный. 2568. Поехали!
Here we see the mortar being prepared to fire, and the mortar finally firing. Here we can also hear a ring coming out of the mortar that's probably so loud and resonating so well, and we can hear it again, that the Ukrainians could probably coordinate some pretty solid counterfire on this thing just by the sound alone. So let's listen to that again. While the 240mm Tulipon mortar seems like it's a very ominous weapon, we already know that the Ukrainians have managed to destroy one, and its maximum firing range is actually around 12 miles, so it's not really that far reaching, and it's most likely within range of counter battery fire every single time it's being used. Also, the caliber of the round it's firing, while being a 240mm, is not that much larger than, say, a 203mm fired from a Pion or a Malka. So with that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of news that we've gotten outside of Severodonetsk, where we can see BMP-T Terminator spotted, and it was very ogre-like, actually. I hope y'all can recognize that as well. Wow, you gotta be kidding me. Man, that sucks. Y'all are about to see the joke I was making. They actually stuck a little Shrek, like from the movie Shrek on the front of the thing. But sadly, it looks like the pictures have been deleted already, so... Unfortunately, I can't show you all that, so we're now going to move into the area of Severodonetsk itself, where we're about to see that pitched fighting is occurring on the suburbs of Severodonetsk, and the Ukrainians are trying to hold the line as the Russians are putting up some incredibly strong pushes towards the city itself. And so here's one of those videos.
Доброго ранку. Черговий обстріл.
От 100 метров. 100? 100 и чуть-чуть, наверное.
Туда влево, да?
Да, ну все, туда вот, в сторону дороги.
Ага.
Фух. Ну, скажем так, время у нас еще есть.
Here we can see them looking around as a tree line.
Далековато. Ну, что-то они перелеты, да, это уже недолет пошел. Квадрик. Сука, блядь, надо его нахуй потушить, пидора. Квадрокоптер висит, корректирует огонь. Ну, кидают пока по ближайшим позициям. Что, опять?
We can now hear shells landing incredibly close to this trench. The Ukrainians look slightly annoyed at the sound.
Опа, ничего себе. Пристрелялись, да, неплохо.
We can actually see the smoke from the round as a Ukrainian soldier looks like he's going to go take a piss now.
Нормально, да. Ага. Да, близко. Ну що, хлопці, так регулярно так насипають, да?
And I gotta say, I'm a huge fan of the quality of these trenches. They're incredibly nice. And that is the end of that video. I also just remembered, and I'm going to explain this in advance so that way people aren't wondering why the pace is picking up. I actually just remembered that our internet provider is going to be cutting off internet service tonight at 12 p.m. on our local time. So we're actually going to have to make sure to speed things up a little bit to make sure that we do not get hit by some unforeseen internet outage that is actually planned in advance. So we'll be trying to hurry through this a little bit quicker. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news here in around Severodonetsk, where we can see the LPR supposedly doing business. Here we can see some very brave LPR soldiers advancing prone under a field that is being watched over by Ukrainians. We can see this very clearly because the cameraman, being as brave as he is, has completely stood up so that way he can get the camera on every single one of them and show y'all exactly what they're doing. Isn't that cameraman so brave? And it's great to know that the Ukrainians have the common courtesy to not shoot the guy dead as soon as he stands up. So now the video pauses, and we're going to see if we can skip forward to the part that I've seen. There we go. For some reason, the video pauses in this one. So here we can see that the firefight is the firefight begins after the video stops acting wonky. We can now see the LPR troops, incredibly brave, firing into the distance. We can also see this, because the cameraman, being as brave as he is, and I have to say, this man needs an award like Hero of the LPR or something. He's standing wide in the open where this guy is shooting down the alleyway to make sure he can show us how brave the LPR soldiers are. Isn't this great? We can now see them firing into a house. We can now see this guy firing an
Точным огнем удалось
grenade.
подавить пулеметные точки нацистов и под прикрытием стрелкового оружия ворваться в здание.
We can now see this guy firing down the street, and I also just saw some people say this is Spaceballs helmet, which is true. I was thinking that too, but I didn't want to sound like silly saying that. But we can now see this guy also firing straight down the road that these guys are all standing in the middle of. That grenade probably destroyed a whole lot of air in that building.
Оставшиеся в живых враги поспешно бежали. Еще один населенный пункт перешел под контроль народной милиции республики. Наступление продолжается.
В ходе наступления народная милиция ЛНР освободила еще один населенный пункт и будет это делать до тех пор, освобождать свои земли от украинских неофашистов, пока это не закончится и земля будет освобождена.
And a lot of people were saying this is a training video, but if you hear him particularly at the end, he actually says Ukrainian fascists something, which tells us that they're actually trying to paint this as this on the front lines near Severodonetsk. So I wanted to show you all that because, of course, it's hilarious how fake and staged this kind of stuff is. So we're now going to be moving on beyond Severodonetsk and to the last two bits of, well, actually the last 3 bits of news we have before we cover the entirety of the Severodonetsk area as a whole. We've now seen a follow-up video today from the last video we got of the Ka-52 in action, and we've now gotten an onboard camera of that same Ka-52 we spotted yesterday in action then. So here's the video of that Ka-52 doing what it does.
Влево.
Есть, уходит. But you see them supposedly hitting a target. I'm very skeptical always whenever the Russians show anything, because they hardly give us any lead up to it. Also, another thing, one more thing, and I know we're kind of a little cut for time, but I just thought of something about these guys up here, you know, in the LPR doing business video. Oh boy, come on. I'm going to try and speed this thing up and let y'all see this again. Spaceballs helmet, where is it? Oh, come on. I'm trying to get through this really quickly and make sure that we're not eating up too much time here. See that helmet right there? I just thought about this. Hopefully I don't get copyrighted for doing this, but... Oh, man. No, not that one. Mario. No, man. If someone needs to paint up their helmet like that in the LPR, because that literally looks like the exact same thing. So I'm not going to stay on that for too long, but that actually just passed right through my head. And so we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of news that we've gotten south of Lysychansk, where we've seen a battle occur with LPR troops supposedly on drone film. So here's that video. Of course, it does say that this is an attack on some Ukrainian soldiers by the LPR, and so here's the film. We can now see a fire burning in some residential buildings. Clearly a Ukrainian stronghold. We can now see an MLRS barrage. Just for a split second, they cut that one off really quick. But you can actually see an MLRS barrage levied against this entire town that probably still has civilians in it. We can now see the supposed stronghold on fire. We can now see some soldiers walking around the street. We're not really sure whose soldiers these are. And that's the end of the video. A very interesting look at something that didn't really show us any Ukrainian soldiers. And that's always something that's very questionable about Russian videos, is that they never show who they're supposedly attacking. We're now going to move on to the last bit of news we've got from the Severodonetsk area, where we can see a Caesar SPG in use somewhere near the front lines. And so, here's the video. Let me mute it. We now see the truck backing up into position and driving past the camera. A very fine piece of equipment and kit. The Caesar SPG has more range, is as heavy hitting, and is quicker to set up and then take down than the M777. It may even be better, and so while the M777 is a great addition to Ukraine's artillery forces, the Caesar SPG is even better, and so it looks like the Ukrainians managed to keep on getting better and better equipment during the course of this war. That is the end of that video, and with that, that is the conclusion of the Kharkiv and northern Donbas news. And so before we start moving down to the Donetsk area, the rest of the Southern Front news, and also the speech from President Zelensky, we're going to take a brief moment to answer 3 questions from the chat, and then we're going to go back to the Southern Front news. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right. So first up on our questions, we have a $100 donation from D. Shaw, who is a longtime channel viewer, as many of you know, who says, a ways to go, vols or Bama. Vols are predominant in Ukraine. Sorry, Slava Ukraine and Slava heroes.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. Of course, that kind of support helps us out a lot. And let me pull up what a vol is. Vols. Tennessee Volunteers. I'm sorry, y'all. I have no idea about sports. But let me see here. Let me reread that one more time. Vols or Bama? Vols are predominant in Ukraine. Sorry. I really, honestly, I don't really weigh in a lot on sports because I know nothing about it. Like, I've, of course, grown up in Alabama, so there's always the Alabama-Auburn thing. But I've never really looked into it, sadly, so I really couldn't tell you which team I'd root for. So I thank you very much for the support. I do thank you, of course, it helps our channel to go on a lot. Of course, without that kind of support, this channel can't keep running. And so it's always great to get that kind of support. But sadly, I can't really weigh in because I don't know a lot about sports. And so with that, I thank you so much for the massive amount of support once again. And we're going to be moving on to the next question.
All right. And thank you very much again, D. Shaw, for your support. And moving on, we have a $25 donation from Tedgar, who says, hello from Finland. I am dude who, like many other Finns, have been wearing combat gear for the first time in a long time. It's all the spine, of course. Body is a bit more mature and squad tactics have changed a lot, but manageable.
Well, thank you very much for the support, and it is very interesting to hear that you've now donned the kit of a soldier again. Hopefully, you don't actually have to use it. Hopefully, the Russians are just posing, but then again, we saw that while we thought the Russians were posing down here near Ukraine, it actually turned out to be entirely true, their intentions. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope everything turns out okay up there, and I hope that you can learn the new Western doctrine, because I believe that's what you're talking about, is that the Finns also adopted a more Western doctrine than what they used to have, and so hopefully you can learn that without a hitch. And so I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment, and with that being said, we're on to the last question of this segment, and then we're moving on to the rest of the news around the country and also the international news, and finally the speech from Zelensky. And so with that, what is our last question?
And just before we get to that question, a quick shout out to Edward Curl, who puts in a $20 donation. Thank you very much, Edward, for watching the channel for such a long time and supporting us throughout these many weeks. So moving on to the next question, or the last question of the segment, goes to Jess P., who puts in a $20 donation and says, given low army morale and the success Ukraine has had against the best tanks Russia already sent into the battle, I can't imagine Russian tankers being terribly enthusiastic about being given T-62s to take into battle.
I couldn't imagine them being incredibly ecstatic about that either. Obviously, they know that their grandfathers drove those tanks when they were serving in the Soviet Army back in the 60s. So I'd imagine that when they hear that they're about to be given T-62s, their morale sinks to rock bottom. In fact, that may start leading to a lot more abandonment of vehicles than we've originally seen at the start. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does weigh in on the comment. And of course, I thank everyone so much for sending in super chats, because that is the only way we can support this channel beyond merchandise sales. So thank you all once again. It helps us to keep running. And so with that, we've reached the end of this question segment. If you have sent in a super chat or are going to send in a super chat, do not fret. We do answer every single super chat by the end of the night, and we also get to live chat questions as well, because I want everyone to know you don't have to pay to get a question to answer. You can just ask one and we'll answer it for y'all. And so with that, we're now going to move on down to the Southern Front, the rest of the news from around the world, and the speech from Zelensky. Starting off in the Donetsk area today, we've seen that the Chechens are putting the special forces down. So here in this video, Don, we can let me actually talk like that guy sounds like he would talk. Here in this video, Don, we can see the special forces, Don, about to blow off each other's heads, Don. So here's the video. We can see the first guy firing over this wooden fence. We can now see the second guy completely flash this guy with a potential backblast of the RPG firing. But fortunately, he didn't die then. His other village idiot is going to kill him off sooner. We can now see this guy leveling the rifle right behind this guy's head, and aiming right beside it. And this guy started to get up. And then this idiot starts shooting right beside him. And this Dumbo has the reflex to start moving and turning into the arc of fire from this guy. So nearly, he got himself killed. So let's watch this whole entire sequence all over again. And let's watch this great Ringling Brothers circus performance that we haven't seen in years. Nearly killed the guy. I mean, like, they would really be doing the Ukrainians a favor and saving them on the extra work if they did, but still, these people are the stupidest people I've ever seen, and to call them special forces is an affront to the special forces community. So we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of news from the Donetsk area, where we can see in the town of Kyiv, I believe is how it's pronounced, we can see the DPR barraging Ukrainian forces in this area with an artillery strike. Here is the video. Hopefully it doesn't have copyrighted music. It has copyrighted music because it's a Russian video. So we can now see the artillery landing around the lakes surrounding this village, and we can also see Ukrainians sitting and resting in a trench here in this clip. We can now actually see that exact same toss strike hitting this village, which I believe confirms that the toss strike was in fact on this village in the DPR. We can actually see the missiles, well, the rockets themselves, actually flying in for a second on screen. You can see them right there. We can now see what may be left after the thermobaric strikes. We can now see some kind of smoke grenade that's maybe been deployed on the field. We can now see some artillery peppering a tree line. And we can see what may be a body of maybe a Ukrainian soldier. So hopefully it wasn't. And if it was, of course, massive respect to him and his sacrifice in defense of his nation. We can now see a tank. I'm not really sure whose tank this is. But we can now see an explosion occur behind this tank. I'm assuming that it is Ukrainian, since it was put up on Russian film. And we can see that the Russians aren't exactly as accurate as the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians most likely would have hit it on the second shot, but we can see that it took the Russians 4 shots to hit the tank. We now see artillery shells raining down on what appears to be an electrical substation. We can still see artillery shells raining down into the tree line. But it seems that they are largely missing the accuracy of their Ukrainian counterparts, which is of course good to know, but still artillery will kill if close enough. And so we can see that the DPR is of course trying to engage in its lifelong artillery battle nearly at this point with the Ukrainian forces, and it appears that the situation has not changed in that area. We're now going to be moving down to the area of Mariupol, where today we can see Russian talking about the filtration. There is a speech-to-text here at the bottom. I don't believe y'all be able to see it entirely, so I'm going to put it up and see if y'all can, and if y'all can't, I'll read it off for y'all.
Что такое фильтрация вообще? Для чего она нужна? И как она физически проходит?
Фильтрация вообще была создана после начала специальной военной операции на территории Украины. Фильтрация нужна в первую очередь для того, чтобы, так сказать, сформировать полную базу данных граждан, плюсы свои у нее. Если так, допустим, например, совершается определенное преступление, там, грубо говоря, кража, МВД будет проще искать преступника, который это совершил, так как все отпечатки пальцев будут в базе, все это будет централизовано. Также помогает выявлять членов националистических батальонов, которые после начала спецоперации подались в бега, так как они тоже проходят эту фильтрацию и по базам их проще отследить. Фильтрация проходит, людей сажают на автобус, везут в местное РОВД.
Местное РОВД это прямо здесь же в городе.
Да, прям централизованной группой.
Город, сейчас секунду, город Володарская, это поселок городского типа, да, это пригород Мариуполя, то есть это прямо здесь же под Мариуполем.
Никольская. Далее заносятся все паспортные данные в базу, пробивают паспортные данные по базе, не числится что-либо за человеком. Далее у него вкатывают отпечатки пальцев, также смотрят по базе. Также гражданин сдает свой телефон в добровольном порядке сотруднику полиции, который в его присутствии читает переписки, смотрит, в каких группах данный гражданин сидит. Дальше проходит допрос, но какие именно вопросы задают, как бы неизвестно. Вопросы могут исходить, исходя из переписки человека или там за его прошлое. Может, он когда-то служил в вооруженных силах ВСУ, там бывший офицер ВСУ, там служил в полиции также Украины. Вот исходя из этого сотрудники полиции уже и решат.
So you can see this guy pretty much talking about the purge or the Holocaust pretty much in simpler terms with a lot more technology added in. So to simplify that and make sure that we can keep moving on and cover all of the news and answer everyone's questions, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news where we've actually seen some drone footage taken of the Azovstal today showing what's left of it. Of course, the fighting has largely died down. We still do have some information that some defenders may be in the plant still, but we don't really have enough information to confirm whether they've surrendered or they're still there. So it's kind of an enigma right now, but we do have footage of what the plant looks like as of today. So let's see if that will load. It looks like it may not. Let's try that again. There we go. It's loaded. And so here's the video. The damage is extensive, of course. The plant was bombed for nearly 2 months on end without break. And we can see that that damage is certainly showing as some of the buildings have nearly completely collapsed at this point. Around 10,000 people used to work in this metallurgical plant. They used to call this place the home of their career. And based off of the damage that we're seeing now, I'm very uncertain if anyone will ever be calling this the home of their career here within years' time. We can now see that some kind of projectile apparently blew through this chimney that is also attached to the metallurgical plant. We can also see the base of another chimney that's somewhere on the other part of the plant. It's surprising to think that after the Azov got pushed out of Mariupol and into the Azovstal steel plant, they lived in these kinds of conditions for nearly 2 months. And it's crazy to believe that men, normal people, normal men and women, there was a decent amount of women in the defense of the Azovstal as well, could bear to live through these kinds of conditions for 2 months. It's unbelievable, really, and kind of a freak thing in a way when you really think about it, that people can actually survive in such dire situations. And so with that, we don't have any more info on Mariupol as a whole today, and so we're going to now move on down the rest of the front, and we're now going to reach the area near Kinsey Rolstery, where today we've seen the 45th Brigade hitting more Russian units. The 45th Brigade is actually entirely composed mostly of artillery, and so their entire job is obliterating Russian units. And we can see that they're doing a pretty good job here. Here, unlike Russian videos, we can of course see them laying out and showing all the vehicles they're about to destroy. You can see them in the tree lines, surrounding farm roads, and also in this trench. We can now see them showing us exactly where the shells fall and what kind of damage they're leading to on the Russian forces. We can now see that one of the shells has landed directly inside of a trench. We now see the fifth shell landing somewhere near those vehicles that were in that group, the 2 BMPs. We can now see the sixth shot landing nearly dead on where the last one was. And we can see that the Ukrainians continue to rain shells down on everywhere that these Russian units were earlier in the video, causing massive amounts of damage, injury, casualties, and of course, all of this is being attributed to the accuracy and dead-on precision of the Ukrainian artillery. As we can see here, the damage is substantial to the Russian forces. And with that, that is the end of the video, and that is another end to the success of the 45th Artillery Brigade here on day 45. We're now going to go off of the front line for a second in 2 directions, and we're first going to go to Zaporizhia, where today we've actually seen footage from a security camera inside of a shopping mall in Zaporizhia where a rocket hit just outside. It's a very weird perspective of what a rocket attack looks like, and here it is. It's very interesting to see this kind of stuff from inside of a building because it looks like it's a normal day, and then it becomes absolute chaos and destruction for a second. And so it's a very interesting perspective for sure. We're now going to be moving down to Melitopol, where we've seen the Russia's finest armor finally arriving on the front lines. Here we can see pictures at the Melitopol train station of T-62s, much like the ones we saw in the last video, arriving in the city to be offloaded and given to Russian units. And this lets you know how badly the Russians are desperate for armor to just fill the gaps of the losses that they've been taking. This tells us that the Russians have certainly run out of modern armor, and they're most likely going to have to start using much older equipment to continue on this war. So it's a very interesting thing to think about, and it's actually showing that the Russians, in terms of hurting on technology, is true, and they're now having to dig even deeper into their supplies and arsenal to pull out stuff that is mediocre at best, terrible at worst. We're now going to be moving on to the next bit of news that's actually outside of Ukraine. We've actually covered all of the Southern Front news now, and we're now going to move into Romania in the town of Braila, where today we've seen Polish vehicles spotted. Now, this Reddit caption, I don't know what the hell it's talking about, honestly. This is saying that these will be used for counteroffensive on Snake Island, but we know good and well that although while I am pro-Ukrainian, the Ukrainians have no ability to actually launch a counterattack to retake that island. They lack the naval power to do such a thing. But here's a video of the Polish forces passing through this Romanian town. As you can see, loads of Polish vehicles passing through this town. An incredibly large convoy, actually, but the fact that the Polish would actually use these vehicles in their own attack on Snake Island seems highly unlikely, and the ability for the Ukrainians to actually field a naval invasion force to attack Snake Island is also highly unlikely. So I'm not really sure what that was, but I thought it was an interesting little insight to what was happening near the Ukrainian border. And so, with that, we're now going to move on to our last bit of news. We've actually covered all of the frontline news for today. And so, if you were here for the frontline news alone, I hope you have enjoyed today's segment, and that is all we have. And so, we're now going to move on to the speech from President Zelensky that will wrap out week 12 and begin week 13. So, here is the speech from President Zelensky. Let me make sure that the graphics quality can't improve. So, here's the video.
Українці, українки. Усі наші захисники і захисниці. Цей день я розпочав зі спілкування з учасниками українського сніданку, який відбувся в рамках Давоського форуму. Хочу дещо сказати про те, чому я беру участь в таких заходах і про те, що говорять інші, зокрема у Давосі цьогоріч. Світ виявився не готовим до української сміливості, до сміливості усіх наших людей, які не поступаються Росії і продовжують захищати нашу державу. Згадайте, як все починалося 24 лютого, коли багато хто у світі навіть не вірив, що Україна зможе вистояти проти повномасштабної війни. Це ж було. А чому це було? Не тому, що всі ці люди, хто сумнівався, однаково помилялись, коли оцінювали потенціал нашої держави, а тому, що багато хто з них і оцінювати не починав. Багатьом з них просто не хотілося брати до уваги Україну. Не було такої звички брати до уваги Україну, хоча у них є звичка брати до уваги Росію. Причому і тоді, коли для цього немає об'єктивних підстав. Для них це зручно і дійсно звично, часто дуже вигідно. Називати тих чи інших політиків Росії героями Достоєвського. Ніби це щось їм пробачає. Розповідати про нібито історичну сферу впливу Росії і про нібито баланс у відносинах в Європі, який без Росії нібито неможливий. Що б не робила російська держава, знаходиться хтось, хто каже, давайте врахуємо її інтереси. Цьогоріч в Давосі це знову прозвучало. Попри тисячі російських ракет, які вдарили по Україні, попри десятки тисяч убитих українців, попри Бучу, попри Маріуполь тощо, попри зруйновані міста і попри побудовані російською державою фільтраційні табори, в яких убивають, катують, гвалтують і принижують, як на конвеєрі. Росія зробила це все у Європі. Але все одно в Давосі з глибокого минулого виринає, наприклад, пан Кісінджер і говорить, що нібито треба віддати Росії шматок України, щоб нібито не було відчуження Росії від Європи. Таке враження, що у пана Кісінджера на календарі не 2022 рік, а 1938. І він думав, що говорить за аудиторією не в Давосі, а в тодішньому Мюнхені. До речі, в реальному 1938 році, коли родина пана Кісінджера рятувалась з нацистської Німеччини, йому було 15 років. І він все чудово розумів. І від нього тоді не чули, що треба нібито адаптуватись до нацистів, замість того, щоб рятуватись від них чи боротися з ними. Почали з'являтись і симптоматичні редакційні статті в деяких західних засобах масової інформації про те, що нібито Україна повинна прийняти так звані важкі компроміси, віддавши територію в обмін на мир. Можливо, в Нью-Йорк Таймс в 1938 році теж писали щось подібне, але зараз знов-таки нагадую, все ж таки 2022 рік. І за всіма цими геополітичними міркуваннями тих, хто радить Україні щось віддати Росії, великі геополітики завжди не хочуть бачити звичайних людей, звичайних українців. Мільйони тих, хто, власне, і живе на території, яку вони пропонують обміняти на ілюзію миру. Треба завжди бачити людей і пам'ятати, що цінності – це не просто слово. Тому я і приділяю таку увагу міжнародним майданчикам, зверненням до парламентарів, до парламентів, до народів інших країн, спілкуванню з експертною спільнотою, з журналістами, зі студентами. Ми повинні зробити все можливе, щоб у світі з'явилась стійка звичка брати до уваги Україну, щоб інтереси українців не перекривалися інтересами тих, хто поспішає на чергове побачення до диктатора. Ось заради чого у мене в графіку завжди багато саме міжнародного спілкування. Вчора і сьогодні Давос, завтра парламент Латвії, післязавтра Стенфорд та Індонезія, далі так само активно. Говорив сьогодні з канцлером Австрії Негамером. Проінформував його про ситуацію на Донбасі та в інших районах бойових дій. Подякував за підтримку. Домовились, що Австрія візьме на лікування наших важкопоранених військових. Доволі предметно обговорили з паном канцлером взаємодію при європейській інтеграції України. Сьогодні також говорив з президентом Ліберії. Головна тема розмови – це протидія продовольчій кризі, яку спровокувала Російська Федерація. Подякував за підтримку нашого суверенітету, територіальної цілісності, зокрема на майданчику ООН. Збройні сили України, наша розвідка і усі, хто захищає державу, протистоять надзвичайно жорсткому наступу російських військ на Сході. Подекуди ворог сильно переважає технікою, кількістю солдатів. Російська влада ухвалила показове рішення. Вони дозволили брати на контрактну службу людей старшого віку. Тобто молодих їм вже не вистачає, але бажання воювати все ж таки зберігається. Ще потрібен час, щоб відбити у них це бажання. Ще потрібна допомога партнерів, передусім зброєю для України. Повна допомога, без виключень, без обмежень. Достатньо, щоб перемогти. Ось про що говорять ті, хто дійсно цінує людей. І я вдячний усім, хто говорив про це, зокрема і в Давосі, хто говорить про це на сторінках ЗМІ і у столицях провідних держав, попри тиск від усіх, хто застряг у 20 столітті, коли інтереси народів дійсно часто торгували заради спроб задовольнити апетит диктаторів. Підписав сьогодні указ про нагородження наших героїв. 144 військовослужбовця Збройних сил України відзначені державними нагородами, з них 17 посмертно. І, звичайно, хочу привітати зв'язківців з їх професійним днем Державної служби спеціального зв'язку та захисту інформації України. Це одна з найбільш чутливих сфер в сучасній війні. Від якості вашої роботи, шановні зв'язківці, безпосередньо залежить наш спільний успіх всієї нашої держави. Своїм указом присвоїв військове звання бригадного генерала 3 полковникам Держспецзв'язку. Вдячний кожному і кожній, хто захищає нашу державу. Вічна пам'ять усім, хто віддав життя за Україну. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the speech from President Zelensky, and that completely rounds out our Day 91 news. If you were here for the news alone, once again, I do thank you so much for watching. If you are new to this channel and you did like today's stream and its summary, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, so that way you can make sure to get this news every single day of the week. We do run these streams every day, except for Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and we cover the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine every single day. And we also upload daily summaries as well, which talk in slight detail about what's been going on and show some of the highlight clips from the day, giving a good idea of what's been happening around the entirety of the front lines. And so with that, I thank you all so much for watching if you're here for the news, and we're now going to be moving into our question segment where we'll answer everyone's questions and address everyone's super chat that did send one in, and we'll also be trying to answer some live questions. Do bear a note tonight, just in advance, everyone, the answers may be incredibly fast because our internet is going to be cut off in 1 hour's time here. So I'm going to try and make sure to get through them as fast as possible so we don't skip over anyone and anyone gets shortchanged, because last night people kind of did get shortchanged because the power went off here for literally 2 seconds and shut everything down. So with that, we're now moving into the questions. And what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and first up on the questions, we have a $20 donation from MMC, who says, Enforcers, thanks for your insightful war coverage. Will you be covering future military operations? I believe the English-speaking Canadians are being persecuted by Vichy French death squads. USA to the rescue.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. I don't really know what specifically you're talking about there, about the English-speaking Canadians being hunted down by your very creative term for saying people from Quebec. But sadly, I don't really know a lot of information about that, and I don't really think that's something that's happening. We may be covering stuff that's going on around the world, like for example what's happening in Burma and also in between India and Pakistan, but our channel isn't going to be focusing entirely on war in the future. It's going to branch out and focus on a lot of stuff that just normally happens, like economics and just interesting tidbits, facts, and information and stuff like that. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're going to be moving on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from William Allen, who says, you would think that technology could provide ground listening devices that would pick up the sound of UAVs in the sky. Both the Germans and British used them during World War II. Any thoughts?
That is an incredibly good observation, and I'm glad that you do know your history well. The British actually built large concrete walls in the middle of nowhere, and people would stand in the middle of them, and these large concrete walls were concave, so they'd actually direct the noise at the listener, and then the listener would try and pretty much triangulate where the aircraft were based off of the sound. I believe they also had systems like that in World War I. They were pretty much large, I guess you could call them hearing aids at the times. They were pretty much large horns, and they would point those up into the sky, and they'd see if they could hear aircraft way out in the distance before they got over no man's land. So I think that would be something that may be able to be looked at in the modern day. Of course, it'd probably take a much more modern approach to it that is more technologically based instead of just simple, like cone to ear or large concrete retaining wall. But I think that may be a step in the right direction. One thing I was thinking is, why not just get some infrared, because all of these little drones are going to be emitting heat of some kind, and just look up into the sky with an infrared lens, and then just wait to see if you see any bright little burning motor on a drone, and then just shoot it down. That's kind of what I was thinking, but that is a pretty solid idea as well. Well, I mean, it's got merit to it. I'm not saying that the Ukrainians would pick that up right away. Also, looking up into the sky with an IR lens would kind of be a little bit difficult as well. But still, it is a pretty interesting idea, and I think it would garner some extra review, I guess you could say. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does, answer the question. And with that, we're moving on to the next one.
And moving on, we have 2 donations without comments. We have a $20 donation from Smokey Valdez and a $20 donation from Tangan Bragiri. Thank you very much to both of you for your support. It's very much appreciated, and with that kind of support, we can keep the channel running for quite some time, so we appreciate it very much. Up next, we have a $20 donation from Tony Lowe, who says, just saying hi again from Ridgecrest, California. Keep up the great work.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and it does help out our channel a lot. It's very cool to hear we have viewers all the way around the world, and it's really neat to hear that we have a lot of viewers here in the United States, including some in California. I've always been interested in California. I don't hear a lot of good things about the big cities, but then again, just to give everyone a little bit of credit, I don't ever hear anything good about any big cities anywhere, so I think that that's just kind of a run-of-the-mill thing. But I've always wanted to see all of the vineyards and stuff in California if they're, still around and stuff. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the comment in a way, and I am glad that you do enjoy our content a whole load. And that kind of support does help us to keep on running in the future and also look ahead. So thank you once again, and with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And real quick, let me recognize a $20 donation from Fat Wong 36, who is a longtime channel viewer, and we appreciate you very much for your support. And moving on, we have a $20 donation from Alan, who says, "Good job as usual, guys. How many Ukrainian civilians have been killed by the war? Also, how does the amount compare to the Germans killing Jews or the amount of civilians in any other wars?"
Well, I thank you very much for the support. And to answer that question, William, right now I believe the number is around 50,000 civilians that have been killed so far. That outnumbers the combatants in general on both sides combined by a pretty good margin. And also, I think that doesn't really compare to anything as of the moment. While it's a substantially high number for a modern war, in terms of what happened in World War II, that's just a little bit larger than the massacre that occurred at Babin Yar, which is a very famous massacre of Jews that occurred inside Kyiv. In fact, this is Babin Yar right here, is right under the Kyiv TV tower. So I think that kind of gives a perspective of how small the amount of civilian casualties have been in a historical perspective, but in the 21st century modern perspective, the amount of civilian casualties has been massive. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $25 donation from Not a Channel, who says, "Just helping keep the lights on, and Canada is just fine."
Well, I thank you very much for the support. It's also interesting to hear that we're now going to have an argument in the live chat about Canada's fine, and there's people up in Canada trying to kill each other. I don't really weigh in a lot on politics, and that also includes other countries, because by weighing in on other countries' political situations, I could be talking about my political views here in the United States. And that's one thing I never really want to touch on this channel, is my own political views. That's for myself to worry about, and I think that news and reporting should largely keep as unbiased a format as possible. While I am pro-Ukrainian, I do look at the situation on the ground, not through rose-tinted vision, but through what's actually happening. So I thank you very much for the support. I'm glad that you do enjoy the channel and that you are willing to help us to keep the lights on here and keep them running. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And real quick, just to let everybody know that there is no need to donate to have your question answered. And also, if you have put in a super chat, it is in the spreadsheet. We just prefer to go down the list in order. So don't worry, we're going to get to your question. Don't get concerned. It's coming up next. So moving on to our next one, we have a $10 donation from DD Lachuga, who says, "Moscow in flames. Roof of Orthodox Christian Cathedral collapses after blaze fire and is sabotage."
Fire in Moscow. Let's see if we got any news. Fire erupts at Aviation Institute. Russian Orthodox Cathedral collapses. This is from Express UK. Yeah, I accept, sure. Which one is this, though? That's what I wanted to find out. The media of Saints Peter and Paul Church. Saints Peter and Paul Church in Moscow. Oh, that showed where I am. Uh-oh. Let's see. Moscow. Come on, just show it to me. This is it, apparently. St. Peter and Paul. Wow, wait a minute. Where is this, actually? This looks like it's the center of the armed forces or something. Let me see. It doesn't say, but a very pretty church. Unfortunate, burned down. I guess that's kind of payback for destroying so many of Ukraine's historic monuments, I guess you could say. So I thank you very much for the support and also providing us with the information. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
All right, and moving on, we have a $10 donation from OG Wakanobi, who is a channel OG, who says, "We figured out your color coding weeks ago, bro."
Well, thank you very much for the support. I think in terms of the days being color coded and which one's which, that's of course, obvious. It's up here in the top left corner of the map. If you click on the link, it literally goes through each day and tells you what color means what. But as far as why the days have the specific colors they do, I don't think that had ever been explained on stream before and why they were that certain color. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does address the comment in a way. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Mike D, who says, "Sorry, I have to ask the question again. I missed my answer last night. If this war continues until winter, will that be game over for Russia? Or could they take back Crimea come around wintertime?"
Well, thank you very much for the support. And I did answer that question last night in the part 2 stream. I hate that you didn't get to hear it. But to answer that question again, I think that the Russians would actually start losing this war again very to a high degree, I guess you could say is the best way to say that, by the fall. The Rasputitsa returns in the fall, and once it returns, the Russian vehicles will, of course, be stuck on the roads. They won't be able to travel off-road, which is why we're starting to see the Russians get a little bit more success, is that the ground is dried out and the Rasputitsa season is over. And so if this war continues into fall, we're going to see the Ukrainians start pushing them back a whole lot more, and also the Russians being, the Russians will start losing even more, soldiers, vehicles, and such things as the fall season started to come into play. So by winter time, they would already be heavily on the back foot at that point, just in terms of the weather alone. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And of course, I'm sorry that you didn't hear it last night. We did run a part 2 stream, but sadly, due to some issues, it couldn't be uploaded as a video. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from a channel legend, BC Skyman, who says, "Red Bull time. Red Bull gives you wings."
I like how you put the emphasis on that. But with that, I thank you so much for the support, BC Skyman. I actually saw you log off and say goodnight just a second ago, and I don't know if you come back and watch the streams again. But if you do, I just want you to know I thank you so much for the support, and I did like the little joke. So I thank you very much once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $50 donation from William Allen again, who's another channel legend, by the way. He says, "Wow, he actually completely recognized the effort of his cyber warriors. I love this guy. Cyber is an operational domain of warfare. Do you think people will include cyber in their conduct of war?"
Yes, I think Western countries are starting to lean more towards using cyber warfare in the actual battlefield than Russia does. Russia, of course, does a decent amount of cyber attacks that we know of, but it's usually something clandestine, and it's not during the middle of a war. It's usually just an attack on a rival nation. But we can see that the Ukrainians, as well as cyber warriors around the world that are helping them out, have been conducting cyber attacks of all kinds on the actual battlefield and also sort of near the surrounding battlefields. So I do have to say that I think that more countries will start to really stick the cyber warfare side of things and also the unmanned vehicle side of things to the forefront, because it does seem that that is the direction that modern warfare is heading into. So I thank you very much for the support once again, William Allen. The support helps out this channel a lot. I know you know that. You've heard that a million times from me. But with that kind of support, we can help to keep this channel running. And so thank you once again. It does mean a lot to us. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And moving on, we have a $10 donation from TJ Johnson, who says, "Starsky mentioned the possibility of escort on his live Q&A today. He also gave you a mention as well. No questions, just a gallon of gas for you and Matt to share."
Well, thank you very much for the support. And yes, Starsky and me actually have become pretty good friends over the course of this whole entire little endeavor. And also Starsky, because I always ask him, because I'm always wondering, like, does he actually want to come back on these streams and stuff? After the last stream, I was like, hey, if you want to come on, that's totally fine. If you don't want to come on, that's fine too. I'll understand you're really busy. You know, there's a war going on. And he said, I'm actually kind of like trapped, you know, doing these things because we're doing so much help for Ukraine that I really can't say no, because there's so much good coming out of being on these streams versus not being on the streams. So that was really nice to hear. And also I saw him covering some of the stuff I was talking about on stream with him, like the T1302 Highway heading to Severodonetsk. He actually touched on that today in the stream Q&A. And so it was really neat to see, and it's great to know that Starsky and me have become pretty good friends. I saw something earlier in the live chat about some channel taking a shot at us, and we're going to be looking into that. Of course, I don't want to say anything without knowing completely what I'm talking about. Ate my shoe one time doing that, and so I'm going to take a better look into that. But I consider that a little bit interesting. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And I do thank you so much for enjoying both of our channels. And with that being said, we're moving on to the next question.
And next up, we have another $10 donation from William Allen, who says, "Sorry I'm late, smoking salmon and having a few beers. Awesome. It wasn't sockeye. Damned good, though. Whoop."
Whoop! Well, I thank you very much for the support, and it's great to hear that you're having a good time over there while watching the stream. Because while the war is always, of course, a little bit harrowing each day, a little bit nail biting. Of course, everyone should be living their normal lives, and I highly suggest that while the war is concerning, don't let it rain on your parade or anything. Of course, enjoy your life, because each day that passes is a day you'll never get back. And and think about this too. Don't let it worry you too much, because there's soldiers out there that are getting shot at in the Ukrainian army, and we still see them dancing and laughing and having a good time too. So never let it worry you too much. But once again, always keep it on your mind, because it is an important war, and it is something that we constantly have to support, or otherwise our governments will just give up on it and push it aside and let it fall into obscurity. So thank you once again for the support, and it's great to hear that you're having a beer and a salmon. Salmon is delicious. I love salmon too. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Robert Meany, who says, "Other maps I've seen today seem to have shown the Russians have taken a portion of the T1302 from the push out of Popasna, which I'm not seeing here. Has the situation changed?"
I do not believe that the situation has changed according to my information. I actually checked with Starsky today, and he said that the Ukrainians have been keeping the Russians held back in their breakthroughs, and the Russians had not managed to breach the T1302. And while some people do say this as an attack against Starsky's validity, is that he's a Ukrainian press officer, so he's not going to be telling the truth, that's not true, because he did say as soon as the Ukrainians got pushed out of Popasna that they had retreated out of Popasna. So I believe his information, and so far, considering that he is a Ukrainian press officer privy to information that a lot of people aren't, and he said that the Russians haven't taken the T1302, I would have to assume that the Russians, of course, are not on the T1302. So I hope that does answer the question, and I do thank you very much for the support. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from B.L. Parak, who says, "Is it possible the T-62s are more resistant to the Javelin?"
No, not at all. Because the T-62s actually had no form of ERA armor or any kind of composite armor. Those things were literally rolled homogeneous steel. So they're pretty much like Cadillacs with a lot thicker armor and also a lot heavier, pretty much. So no, they would not be better protected against a Javelin. That would be working backwards too. Is if a tank 50 years old is more competent and more capable protection-wise or in any avenue than a modern tank, that wouldn't make a lot of sense in terms of what the Russians and everyone else in the world are doing, because it would be counterintuitive to design something that is worse and less effective than what you already have. And that kind of annoys me too with people who live in fantasy world, like just to kind of like go into a rabbit hole there, but we're going to keep it really short. There's a lot of people who say that German tanks from World War II, like the King Tiger or the Tiger I, could face up against an M1 Abrams and win, and I think these people are like straight up delusional or something, because if they could, then why aren't they being used anymore? Why did they get replaced? And that'd be a great question to ask, and the reason is because they suck. So I hope that answers the question, and I do thank you very much for the support. And with that being said, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Larry Pickett, and Larry does not leave a comment. And Larry, we appreciate your support very much.
Thank you.
And moving on, we have... go ahead.
I want to thank you very much for the support, Larry, and I guess you could say with that kind of support in the super chat, we will be living like Larry. And so with that being said, we're on to the next question.
Now, Enforcer, I was actually debating saying that, but I chose not to say it, so that's weird. You were thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah.
But anyways, moving on to the next one, we have a $10 donation from William Allen again, who says, "Enforcer, I have a Bachelor's of Science degree in History from Troy State of Montgomery. I, being from Texas, am good at both." Whoop.
Whoop! And I thank you so much for the support. And that's also very interesting to hear. I'm actually pursuing a bachelor's in history, which is pretty interesting to me. Of course, I'm a huge history buff, and that's kind of what leads me to have the analysis I have right now of the war. And so, once again, I do thank you very much for the support and providing us with a little bit of tidbit of information about yourself, because it kind of shows we both have a parallel there. And with that being said, we're moving on to the next question.
And next up, we have an $8 donation from Dad Good, who says, "Thanks, Enforcer and Matt. I love the Bayraktar song, but think the Stugna deserves its own song as well if any talented Ukrainian musicians are listening.
I do agree, and hopefully there is a talented musician out there that can make a song about it, because I think that there's a couple of weapons out there in the Ukraine war right now that deserve their own songs, just like the Bayraktar. So I thank you very much for the support, and I do entirely agree, and I hope that there is a musician out there listening. Also, what about DJ Bonebreaker's remix of Matthew going dun 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 dun? I haven't heard back from him. Where is he? I want to hear about that. So anyways, with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And moving on, we have an $8 donation from Jordan S., who says, "It's scary watching the Russian army push through Popasna and the surrounding areas, and my question is, why were they able to make progress there, but nowhere else along the front line?"
It's a very interesting question, and I'm going to try and compound this statement as short as possible. We are pressed for time right now, because the internet's going to be cut off here in about 40 minutes. But to answer that question, the Russians start using a new strategy, and I believe this is the strategy that's been leading to all of their breakthroughs, is that their mechanized units will engage the Ukrainian infantry head on, and then their airborne units will then bypass the Ukrainian units and threaten them with encirclement, which forces the Ukrainian units to retreat to a more defensible position. So that's actually what has been leading to the breakthroughs near Popasna and Vrubivka, and also what has been leading to the breakthrough that most likely occurred at Torskay, although we don't have enough information to confirm that that was the exact strategy that the Russians used up there. But that is certainly 100% the strategy that was used near Popasna. And that's why you're not seeing it being repeated anywhere else along the front, is maybe because that's the only area that has a sizable amount of airborne units that can actually lead to a strategy like that working. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that answers the question. And with that being said, we're on to the next one.
And just for everybody asking, it's Spectrum doing a scheduled maintenance. Some people are coming up with some pretty creative things about why the internet's going out, but no, it's just scheduled maintenance. So anyways, back to the questions. We have a $7 donation from Junebug, who does not leave a comment. And thank you very much, Junebug, for your support. And thank you for sticking around for such a long time. And up next, we have a $5 donation from Nate R., who says, "Great coverage."
And I thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you do enjoy our coverage. I put a lot of effort into this. I put my heart and soul into it, honestly. And it's always great to hear, and I've said this several times. I try and come up with new things to say, but sadly, I'm not really a creative person. That's why you always hear me say it with that being said, and as you can see, and stuff like that. But I do thank you very much for the support. It does help me out a lot. It helps me to keep doing this. And so, with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Mai Zhu Yang, who says, "If the Russian troops are regrouping or resupplying, why don't the Ukrainian troops advance forward to retake land back or cut their main supply line off?" Excuse me.
Could you reread that one for me real quick?
Yeah. They say, "Why don't the Ukrainian troops advance forward to retake land back or cut their main supply line off?"
That may be because the Ukrainians don't see the ability right now to do that. Just because the Ukrainians are able to launch counterattacks at certain times before doesn't mean that they always have the ability to launch a counterattack. They may be trying to replenish supplies, make sure their units are rested. There may be other factors involved as well. For example, it could just be that the way the battlefield's unfolding, there's not really a weak spot in the Russian alliance that they can exploit right now that they think would be advantageous. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least in brief, and I do thank you very much for the support. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Lala. Thank you very much for your support, and we appreciate it very much, as always. And thank you for watching. Moving on up next, we have a $5 donation from Suzanne B., who says, "Fried chicken fund, potato salad or mashed potatoes with gravy?" Question mark.
Oh man, that's a tough question. I love potato salad and mashed potatoes at the same time, with gravy for sure. I don't know which one Matthew likes, but we have been getting a lot of Publix potato salad lately, the southern style, and I do have to say, it's some pretty good stuff. Oh my god, you're really making me pick the hard ones, aren't you? I mean, like, that's the first question that's been really, really good in a while. Like, it's making me really think. Like, there's great questions, but I already know the answer to them. This one, I don't have an idea what I would pick. What would you pick, Matthew?
I would pick the potato salad all day long.
Oh man, I think I'm gonna have to go with that too because potato salad is delicious, honestly. So with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer your question. And just for everyone to know, because I want to make this clear, because I misspoke there for a second. A lot of y'all have incredible questions, but the thing is I usually don't have to think about my answer. That's what I was saying there. And this is the first one where I actually have to sit there and really rake my brain, and I really feel hurt to pick one or the other. So with that, I hope that clears it up. I didn't want anyone to think that I'm sitting here thinking y'all's questions are stupid. A lot of them are actually pretty good. There are a few, though, where I'm like, huh? But anyways, with that, I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to be moving on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $100 donation from Steve2848, who says, Battle of Easting 73 is a great video. They mentioned T-62 turrets were hand cranked. Do you know if that's correct? And thanks for your continued reporting.
I thank you very much for the support, and I'm not really sure if I can attest to the validity of that statement, because hypothetically, those models of tanks should have had hydraulically operated turrets. Now, that could have been something that was true during 1967 when Syria went to war with Israel, because Syria was actually using Panzer IV-H's, which I believe a few of them actually still had hand-cranked turrets. But as far as Iraq, the Battle of Easting 73 or 73 Easting, I'm not really sure which one it is, but I think that those were hydraulically operated. So I thank you very much for the support. That, once again, is an assumption on my part. I'm not really sure if that information is true. But based off of the technology, it should have had hydraulically operated turrets. So I hope that does answer the question. And with that being said, we're moving on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Judo2001, who says, Starsky can lie to me if it helps Ukraine. Slava Ukraine.
Well, thank you very much for the support. And that's something y'all always have to keep. Well, I don't really think y'all should keep that in mind, but it is something that is true. Sometimes misinformation is spread deliberately, so that way operational security can be maintained on the front lines. Not saying that I've done that before, but well, actually, I don't do that because I don't even weigh in on what the Ukrainians are doing whatsoever. So I never really have to worry about lying what the Ukrainians are doing. I usually give away exactly what the Russians will probably be doing within the next few days. So hopefully that gets me poisoned by the SFB. That would be a high honor. And so with that being said, I hope that does address the comment. And with that being, well, I've said that twice. We're moving on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Ecom Ikpat, who says, is Russia using the T-62 to hold areas they've taken while moving more modern, cohesive units to the front, and how will Ukraine contain their front lines?
Let's see. Can you reread that one to me real quick?
They said, is Russia using the T-62 to hold areas they've taken while moving more modern, cohesive units to the front, and how will Ukraine contain the front lines?
I don't think they're actually using those T-62s in rear line units. I think they're actually going to be using those as front line units in areas where they believe anti-tank weapons are deficient, at least in number. I also want to circle back real quick and thank Steve a whole load once again for his support. I just actually realized just a second ago that I answered Steve's question and I hardly even touched on his support, which he's sent in about 3 times in a row over the past 3 days. And I want to thank you so much once again, Steve, because you're one of the movers and shakers on this channel that helps us to keep doing what we do. And so I thank you so much once again. It helps us out a load, and I wanted to make sure that you knew how appreciative I actually am of the support, because I answered the question and I looked back, I was like, wait a minute, that was Steve's. So moving back on to this one, and circling back to it, those T-62s are most likely going to the front line, and they've been brought in most likely because the Russians are deficient in terms of their main battle tank force on the front lines, and so these are being brought in to fill in the gaps. That's kind of what I'm thinking, but it could also be what you're suggesting as well. I'm not really sure, but that's kind of my opinion on the situation right now. And so I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that being said, we're moving on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from John Doe. Thank you very much, John, for your support of the channel. We appreciate it very much. And up next, we have a $5 donation from Johnny Baby, who says, seen on multiple streams today, a video of Ukraine Brigade refusing to fight due to a weapons shortage. Can you confirm or clarify? Much respect.
I have seen that video. I believe it actually came from the Severodonetsk area, supposedly, and there was Ukrainian soldiers saying that they were short on weapons, ammunition, leadership, and they were refusing to fight. The problem is that Starsky's unit is in that area, and he has said to me that the morale has never been better. They are well armed, they're well equipped, and they're fighting just fine. And based off of the information I've been able to collect, that does appear to be the case. So I think that may actually have been an event of Russian propaganda making its way through and trying to spread disinformation, and hopefully what their intention may be is that that video will be seen by other Ukrainian troops in the area and demoralize them, thinking, well, demoralized, that's the wrong term, may start to lower their spirits as well, thinking that other parts of the front are poorly equipped and soldiers along the front are refusing to fight. That may be the case. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. I did see it, but it's been flagged as disinformation and propaganda at the moment. So I hope that does answer the question, and with that being said, we're moving on to the next one.
And moving on, we have another $5 donation from Johnny Baby again, who says, I'm hearing the 777 howitzer is made with titanium, and they are beginning to crack after so many uses. Also, is it true that Russia started rebuilding Mariupol?
What is the M777 made of? Titanium. The construction of the M777 makes extensive use of titanium and titanium castings, enabling a weight reduction of 7,000 pounds. Does titanium crack? It has been known for more than 10 years that titanium alloys suffer from intergranular stress corrosion cracking if they are in contact with chlorides at elevated temperatures. I'm not really sure if I can confirm that. I haven't really heard a lot of information about it. And on top of that, that would be very questionable if a large amount of our artillery reserves that would be used in the war are now cracking due to use. So thank you very much for the support. I'm not going to weigh in on that one in either direction. That may actually be true. Because while I wouldn't like to believe that, that is, of course, something that can happen. While the United States military is the best in the world, there are, of course, shortcomings in it here and there. You know, for example, that could be one. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does weigh in on the answer a little bit. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And moving on, we have another $20 donation from William Allen, who says, the Russians have always used the idea of mass of weapons will roll over any opposition. Do you think that's because they don't give a damn about how many will die?
I think that's entirely the reason why. We've known for a long time that the Russians don't really care at all about how many civilians that get killed during their wars. We've seen that time and time again with Afghanistan, Chechnya, Georgia, Syria. Anywhere they've been involved, civilian casualties are not even a consideration. That is just an accepted fact of the war. So I think that that may be the reason why they just do nothing but waves of equipment that is incredibly cheap and easy to field. So with that, I thank you very much for the support once again, William Allen. It does help us out a lot, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that being said, we're moving on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Diffuse56, a longtime channel legend, who says, did you guys happen to see a report from one of the news services that popped up recently that said some Ukrainian soldiers are defecting to Russia?
I have not. And I wouldn't doubt that. Of course, there's the odd occurrence historically where soldiers do defect to a side that's worse. For example, there's been a few Americans that have defected while on the DMZ in Korea from South Korea, and then they defect over to North Korea. There's a few that have done that, so I wouldn't doubt it. There's probably been a few, but I haven't heard of that story myself. So I thank you very much once again for the support, Diffuse56. You've been around forever. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Kevin Scott 76, who says, today's news, Mr. Lunchtime realizes he's been eating for the wrong side.
Well, thank you very much for the support, and I do like the little joke. Of course, Mr. Lunchtime is one of the huge channel jokes, literally and metaphorically at this point on this channel. And so I do thank you very much for the support. It is a funny little joke. And just for some people who may not understand what the Mr. Lunchtime joke is really about, it's about him being way too there's really no other word for it. Way too fat for military service. I'm not someone who is physically fit for military service. While I'm not, like fat, I'm not like fit either. So, so I just kind of accept that for what it is. And I can tell you that Mr. Lunchtime is well beyond the level that someone should actually be in the military for. He is definitely not physically fit. And if he ever had to get into a pinch and get out of a situation, he definitely couldn't. So that's kind of the joke. Because if he was just wandering around daily life, I wouldn't bat an eye. He'd just be another dude. But when you put a military uniform on that guy and he's serving in the military, that raises a lot of eyebrows and a lot of questions about why he's even there and what he's actually going to be doing. And so with that, I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question in a couple of ways. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have 3 $5 donations from Fat Wong 36, who says, $5 donation train, get some, and Leaf Springs.
Well, thank you very much for the support, and I do thank you very much for allowing us on that Leaf Spring train. Of course, this is the Leaf Spring Army, and so everything runs on Leaf Springs here. And so, once again, I thank you very much for the support. It does help our channel a lot, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And we have another $5 donation from Fat Wong 36, who says, thanks, fellas, it means a lot.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that this channel does mean a lot, and that we're also able to report on largely accurate news throughout every single day of this war. 91 days in. And honestly, since I didn't have a coffee, I feel worn out tonight. I'm sitting here doing this feeling exhausted. But it is crazy to me that we've gone on 91 days at this point, and we're still going strong. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question. But before we do, how many Super Chats do we have left?
We have just 5 left.
All right, and with that, we're actually going to put a cutoff on tonight's Super Chats. This may be an incredibly early cutoff, but at the same time, our internet's about to get cut off here within probably under 30 minutes. And so I don't want to go and not answer people's questions because our internet gets cut off, and that's going to be entirely out of our control. It's going to be off for probably an hour. So with that, I thank you all so much for the support. If you would like to support the channel and get something out of it, make sure to buy some of our merch, because of course that's pretty neat, and you could wear a t-shirt with the Enforcer on it. How neat is that? And so with that, we're going to move on to the last 5 Super Chats for the night, and then we're going to answer a couple of live chat questions and round out this stream a little bit early, so that way we can make sure we're not cut off by an internet outage.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Carl Brugger, who says, do you think U.S. should ramp up production on tanks, javelins, etc.? If so, what are the highest priorities, and how can we overcome the challenges?
Is he talking about what Ukraine should do or what the United States should do?
I think the United States.
The United States should just focus on replenishing its stores. There's really no priority to it because we're not really in too much of a rush. Once again, much like Russia, the United States can rely on its nuclear arsenal and threaten anyone that stands in its way with nuclear annihilation. So it's not really anything we have to worry about too quickly. And also, if we ever got involved in anything and everything went down the tubes immediately, we can always rely on the U.S. Navy to ensure that nothing actually happens to the United States directly. So with that, I hope that answers the question in a way, because there's really no particular route. It's not like there's a perfect route. You can, of course, pick multiple solutions, and most of them will work. And so I hope that answers the question, and I do thank you very much for the support. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And Enforcer, we actually had one more super chat come in if you'd like to read that one off.
Sure.
Okay, so it is from B. Baldy, who puts in a $10 donation and says, Enforcer, just how much equipment do you think Russia has left or on reserve?
I think just talking about tanks alone, so that way I can make sure the answer is really simple, because if not, it'll become incredibly long and it'll take up the rest of the night. On tanks alone, we know that they had about 3,000 modern operational tanks, most likely. They probably have an additional 2,000 tanks that are incredibly dated, like those T-62s, but operational as in the engine may run, but everything else on them may not work. So I hope that kind of answers this question. I'm assuming that they probably have around 3,000 modern operational tanks and around an additional 2,000 semi-operational antiquated tanks from times long ago. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question, at least in brief. And with that being said, we're moving on to the next question.
And just to recognize one more super chat that just came in, we have a $50 donation from Richard Bray, who says, thanks for all your hard work. I look forward to the coverage every single day.
And I do thank you very much for the support, and I am glad that you do look forward to the show every day. It's, of course, a little bit tiresome to do every day, but I find it my service in the help of Ukraine and also making sure that my friends over there are taken care of, because I do have a few friends over there, and I've also made some new ones along the way. And so with that, thank you so much, Richard, for the support, and we're now going to move on to the next question.
And we have another $5 donation from FatWong36, who says, I'm going to support your future endeavors however I can. The Enforcer and Matt should be recognized for the diligence alone.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I've actually been thinking about trying to reach out and at least let the story of the Lee Spring Army be known, so that way it can at least get its 5 minutes of glory somewhere out there in the world, because I do think that all of the contributions that all of y'all have done is worthy of having the whole entire world be known, because I saw a Swiss filmmaker raise $50,000 over like the course of a month, and he got worldwide recognition for it, and I was thinking, why aren't my viewers getting worldwide recognition for the amount of work we've done, you know, to support Ukraine? So I was thinking about trying to get out there and see about getting the word out about the Lee Spring Army and what we've done. And so I do thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does address the question in a way. And so with that being said, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $4 donation from Simon Shorthouse, who says, according to Reddit, the word Don is used the same as, do you get me? Do you earn me? Love your work, Don.
Do you earn me? Well, thank you very much for the support. And I did hear that before, but it's still so annoying to hear every single other word, Don. You know what I mean, Don? Because if I said Don, every other word, Don, it would get very annoying, Don. And that's why a lot of people, Don, do not like Don when I say Don so many times when I'm talking Don, like this, Don. So if you get, like, I understand what it means, but still, when you do something like that, it's really annoying. And it's not really good in terms of proper English or the speaking of any language properly. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I do thank you for providing us with that info. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And moving on, we have a $4 donation from NOYDB, who says, Armaj Don, NOYDB equals none of your damn business.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I thank you for the little joke right there. And so with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And we have a $3 donation from NOYDB, who says, 1. Open Google Maps. 2. Next to map title 3 vertical dots. 3. Choose download KML. And 4. That file will open Google Earth.
Interesting. I may look into that, and I may see about trying to change what this map looks like, but at the same time, I feel like satellite view overloads us with too much detail, and then we start forgetting important points like rivers, roadways, and population areas, because if a map gets too detailed like a satellite view, I do feel like some of the fidelity of the information will be lost. At least the strategic outlook on the news. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment in a way. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And real quick, let me give a $20, or excuse me, let me give a shout out to Sharon Tukolsky, who gives a $20 donation and does not leave a comment.
And I do thank you very much for the support, Sharon. It does help out our channel a lot. And I am glad that you do support this channel and want us to keep on running this thing and looking into the future as well. Also, I like the little emoji you put. It says rage quit. I don't know what that's about, but it looks pretty funny. And so thank you very much for the support. And with that, excuse me, we're on to the next question.
All right, and we're moving on to the next one. We have a $3 donation from NOYBD again, who says, I want a t-shirt with mother-in-law on it.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. And to answer that question, while we did do Mr. Lunchtime merch, I felt like Mr. Lunchtime was an exclusive thing to this channel. Well, honestly, St. Javelin and stuff is kind of like a joke thing too, but I actually have a rule that I will not put any Ukrainian imagery or symbology on any of my merchandise, because then I feel like I'm profiting off of their success. And I don't really like that, because it kind of feels a little bit questionable in a way to me. But you know, things like Mr. Lunchtime, jokes like that like kind of like grew out of this channel, I'm kind of fine with doing. But I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, how many super chats do we have left?
So this is our final super chat of the night. It's a $2 donation from Mr. Lunchtime, who says, lunch money from Saint, Mr. Lunchtime, great work guys, Jeremy.
Well, I thank you very much, Dawn. It always helps our work, Dawn, and it helps us to eat, Dawn. So thank you, Mr. Lunchtime, Dawn, for blessing us since you are the saint of eating, Dawn, and letting us eat again, Dawn. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. And now we're going to move on to 3 questions from the live chat, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream. And so with that, what are our questions, Matthew?
So first up from the live chat, we have a question from Dead Toad, who says, Enforcer, are Russians shooting their wounded?
I don't know about that. I mean, like, I would assume not. That would, now, if anything would be demoralizing, that would be the most demoralizing thing on Earth. So I feel like they wouldn't, but at the same time, I don't really have any information on whether they do or don't. We've seen a lot of medical evacs, well, medevacs, I guess you could say, conducted by the Russians during this war, so it is showing that wounded soldiers are making it out, at least in some degree, but I haven't really heard of any recounts of them shooting wounded soldiers on their side. So I hope that kind of answers the question away, because while I do have low regards for the Russians, I don't feel like they would go that low. I would be very surprised, honestly, if they were actually doing that. So I hope that answers the question, and we're on to the next one.
And real quick, I just have to give credit to one of the viewers who figured something out. Blue Pea says, "You heard me? Was that the gangbanger in Louisiana?" And yes, you are correct. We actually got that off of a Ross Kemp video. It was some guy in a place in Louisiana, and he kept saying, "You heard me? You heard me?" Every single sentence. It was the most hilarious thing I've ever seen.
I can't believe that guy knew that specific moment out of everything that's happened on the internet. He knew the specific thing we were talking about. Oh my God. All right, on to the next question.
Okay, and just real quick, one more super chat came in. We're going to make this real fast so we can get to our live chat questions. It's another one from William Allen, who puts in a $20 donation and says, I need a t-shirt with the Enforcer logo stating the Enforcer needs you for the Leaf Spring Army. And William, real quick, I'll make a comment on that. We actually have a concept design for that exact one. So it might be coming in the future, so stay tuned.
And I think Matthew actually answered that question for me. He's the one who does most of the merchandising stuff on this channel. And so I'm just going to have to back him up and say that actually is in the works, and I have seen a little bit of it before. And so with that, I thank you very much for the support, William. I hope that does answer the question. And now we're going to get to our last 2 live chats questions for the night, and then we're going to round out the stream. And so with that, on to the next question.
And moving on, we have one from Woody Stems, who says, why do the Stugna always look like they are being fired a few feet away from the operator? Aren't they designed to be remote?
Yes, they are designed to be remote, but they're not really remote per se, like they can be fired a mile away from the actual launcher. Remote is in they're like a little distance away where the Stugna is in the the Stugna is in the open, but the operators are behind cover. So that's kind of why it always seems like they're very close to the operators, is because it's just kind of a little bit of ways away where the crew wouldn't be seen, but the Stugna could shoot at the tank. So I hope that answers the question. And with that, we're on to the last question of the night. And so who is the lucky person who sent in the last question of the night?
So the last question of the night goes to I Am Gift Bearer, who says, Enforcer, why the hell isn't anyone sending Ukraine modern fighter jets? Surely they can't still be chicken of Putin. The best way to beat him is not to let him have the power to make you cower.
Well, that's a very good question. The thing is that they are scared of what Putin would do in that situation. As far as I know, no country has actually sent Ukraine fighter aircraft, and it's entirely because Russia says that would be crossing the line. While I think that's an idle threat, and if the West sent over aircraft, the Russians probably wouldn't do much, there's always the implication that they could do something. And then that will lead to nuclear war. And so that's really the reason why no one's sending stuff over. And I know that that answer sounds like a cop-out from most countries around the world, but that's literally where they're at. That's kind of the position that everyone's taken right now. And so with that, I hope I've answered that question pretty well. And we've now reached the end of the question segment for the Day 91 news. I thank you all so much for watching. I hope I have answered everyone's questions to the best of my abilities, and I hope y'all have enjoyed both the news and the question segment that came afterwards. Once again, it's always a pleasure for me to report this news every single day, and I hope that y'all have enjoyed once again. I hope to see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and also, if you're a new viewer here and you have enjoyed this stream, make sure to subscribe because you're apparently a trooper and you must like these streams. These streams run every single day of the week except for Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time every single night, covering the past 24 hours of the war. And on Tuesday, we actually cover the past 48 hours of the war. So we literally cover every single hour of this war for every single day until the war ends. We also upload daily summaries in the middle of the day showing some of the highlight clips from the day, you know, the larger events that happened. And so I hope that y'all all do enjoy. And for all of my viewers who have been around for a while, I thank you all so much for being members of the Lee Spring Army and helping me to help out Ukraine. And so with that, I thank you all once again, and I hope you all have a great night. Stay safe and take care.